Hi there. Welcome to Applying Project Management in the Real World. If you've joined us for this program's previous courses, then you've developed a solid foundation of project management knowledge and skills. Those courses covered how a project progresses through the initiation, planning, execution, and closing stages. They also taught how to manage projects using different methodologies and approaches, like Agile and Scrum. If you haven't completed the previous courses, we recommend checking them out before starting this course to ensure that you're ready to work through all of the upcoming activities. As you progress through this course, you'll create project documents based on an imagined scenario. You'll learn details through conversations, emails, and other materials just as you would in a real-world scenario. By the end of this course, you'll have developed a portfolio of project management documents that will demonstrate your ability to manage stakeholders and teams, organize plans, and communicate project details. All of this can be valuable when applying for jobs or working on projects in your current line of work. Before we go any further, I want to take a few minutes to introduce myself. My name is Dan, and I'm a program manager here at Google, and I'll be your instructor for this course. At Google, I work on a team that promotes responsible practices in designing, building, and applying artificial intelligence, also known as AI, and machine learning. I support teams in adopting tools and techniques they can use to evaluate their machine learning models and determine whether they are performing equitably. I love this role because I get to support teams in building products that work for our users. Before my current role, I worked on the Google AI Residency Program team. This is a rotational program for people who are interested in doing AI research, but who come from non-traditional backgrounds. This work was compelling to me because I personally didn't have any experience with AI or machine learning before coming to Google. This just goes to show that if you have strong project management skills, you often don't need to be a subject matter expert in a given domain to work in that field. Prior to my time at Google, I worked outside of tech, first as a math teacher and then as a sponsorship coordinator for a professional soccer team. Throughout my career, I've always been passionate about education, whether that's teaching students in the classroom or teaching developers how to ethically implement AI systems. So I'm pretty excited about leading you through this course. It should be a lot of fun. Now let's get right into the scenario that will apply to all of the activities in this course. In this imagined scenario, a small restaurant chain called Sauce and Spoon wants to meet their annual growth and expansion goals. As one way to meet these goals, they've decided to launch a pilot project to test out the impact of installing new tabletop menu tablets. The new menu tablets will allow the restaurant to serve more guests in less time, and will provide valuable data that will help Sauce and Spoon meet its business goals. The company just hired PETA as their first in-house project manager to oversee the tablet rollout at 2 of the restaurant chain's 5 locations. Throughout the course, you'll observe PETA as she guides her team through planning and executing the project deliverables. Although she has 5 years of project management experience, PETA hasn't managed a restaurant project before. You'll get to follow the project through its life cycle as PETA learns about the restaurant industry, determines the goals of the project, negotiates with stakeholders, and much more. Along the way, you'll record details of the project to use in course activities. You'll also evaluate PETA's project management skills as she works to complete this project in scope, on time, and within budget. You'll learn what works and what doesn't, and how to problem solve your way through a project. As you progress through the course, we'll review and practice key project management concepts, which include analyzing materials to identify project requirements, solve problems, and manage stakeholders, applying important negotiation techniques and influencing skills, listening with empathy when working with a team, and practicing your stakeholder communication skills. We'll explore these concepts in more depth, and I'll explain how each concept applies to the Sauce and Spoon project. Each activity will contain guiding questions to help you create common project documents that you can speak to in a job interview and utilize throughout your career. As you work through these activities, you may want to take notes on some of the information you learn. Feel free to use whichever tool you prefer, whether that's the Coursera note-taking system or another method. In the upcoming videos, I'll explain the project in more detail and share project management best practices so that you can complete the associated course activities. Are you ready? Let's go. Hi again. Ready to get started? In this next set of videos, you'll apply strategic thinking and effective business writing to initiate a project. You'll analyze project documents and supporting materials to identify project requirements, evaluate stakeholders, and problem solve. You'll use a project charter as a tool to align project scope and goals among stakeholders. And you'll apply effective negotiation skills with stakeholders to prioritize project goals. In this video, I'll review the purpose and main components of a project charter so you can get started creating one for the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout. After this video, you'll review supporting materials that will enable you to observe PETA as she initiates the project. Then you'll apply strategic thinking to create a project charter based on what you observed. Strategic thinking involves analyzing documentation and talking with stakeholders to inform decisions based on the information available to you. Okay, let's review the purpose and main components of a project charter. A project charter is a formal document that clearly defines the project and outlines the necessary details to reach the project's goals. The project manager creates the charter during the initiation phase, which is the first phase of the project lifecycle. The project charter helps you organize vital project information, create a framework for the work that needs to be done, and communicate those details to the necessary people. It's also useful as a reference throughout the project's lifecycle, since it can help stakeholders realign on the project's scope, goals, and costs. The project charter contains key information about a project, like the summary, goals, and deliverables. The goal of the summary is to provide an overview of the project and to outline the goals you hope to accomplish. Summaries should be brief, just a few sentences at most, and to the point. After the summary comes project goals and deliverables. Project goals refer to the desired results of the project, and deliverables refer to specific tasks and tangible outcomes that enable the team to meet project goals. In general, project goals address the overall result that stakeholders are aiming to achieve. They are determined by input from stakeholders and the project manager. For example, part of Sauce and Spoon's annual growth and expansion goals is launching the tablet rollout project. And one deliverable of the project is the successful installation of working tablets at 2 restaurant locations. The last part of a project charter that we'll cover here is scope. Remember that scope refers to the boundaries of a project. Along with the scope, the charter contains information about work that's out of scope. Details that don't contribute to the project's goals are considered out of scope. Scope was covered in a previous course, and I'll continue to discuss it in more detail in an upcoming video. Let's recap what we just covered. A project charter is a formal document that clearly defines the project and outlines the necessary details to reach the project's goals. The primary components of a project charter are the summary, goals, deliverables, and scope. A charter can include other sections as well, such as budget and cost, and success metrics. I'll discuss those sections in another video. In the upcoming activity, you'll identify and document the project name, summary, goals, and deliverables of the Sauce and Spoon tablet pilot in a project charter. Ready to get started? Go on to the activity to begin the project charter. Once you've finished, meet me in the next video to continue learning about the project and adding to the charter. Welcome back. So far, you should have added the project name, the project summary, and some goals and deliverables to your project charter. In this video, we'll discuss how to use the charter as a tool to get the project stakeholders in alignment about the project's scope and goals. Then, in the upcoming activity, you'll review supporting materials containing information about the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout. You'll also observe how PETA guides a conversation among disagreeing stakeholders to get alignment on the project charter details. Then, you'll identify key aspects of the conversation that will help you revise and clarify details in the charter you drafted in the last activity. Let's get into it. Anytime you're communicating the details of your project, you need to think about your audience and what information is important to them. When adding details to a project charter, ask yourself the following questions about your audience, and if it's helpful, try answering these questions in your notes. Who are your stakeholders? In this case, your audience includes all of your key stakeholders. What details are most important to them? Are there project details that they might disagree with? Once you've identified what you believe are important details, review your charter and ensure all of those details are included. From there, you'll be able to present the charter to your stakeholders and confirm that everyone agrees with the project information. Think of the project charter this way. In addition to serving as a formal document that defines the project, a project charter is also an alignment tool. Here, alignment refers to reaching agreement between two or more parties. A common cause of project failure is misalignment among stakeholders about the details of the project. Misalignment can also happen between you and your stakeholders when you have differing visions for the project. That's why it's so important to align with your stakeholders before the work begins. Stakeholders generally aren't involved in the day-to-day tasks of project executions, so it's crucial to take time during the initiation phase to create a project charter that clearly lays out the details of a project. This helps ensure that the team is working toward the outcomes expected by all of the stakeholders, and not just some of them. Usually, the initiation phase is the most ideal time to make changes to the project. As the project progresses into the planning and execution phases, substantive changes might require undoing work that's already been completed. So in this early phase of the project lifecycle, you shouldn't be afraid to make adjustments. Here's an example of how you might experience misalignment. Let's say you're discussing the main goals of the Sauce and Spoon project. One stakeholder has a vision of being able to fully automate the ordering experience with the tablets over time. Another stakeholder has a different goal. Rather than fully automating ordering, they want the tablet rollout project to improve order accuracy. To help resolve this situation, a project manager might facilitate a discussion between the two stakeholders to try and reach an agreement to confirm alignment on the project's goals. When you present a project charter to your stakeholders, it's important to collect feedback and identify where there are misalignments. Then, you can make changes to address those misalignments. If you and your stakeholders take the time early on to clearly define the project, then you're much more likely to deliver the outcomes your stakeholders expect at the end of the project. As a project manager, it's important to record the feedback you receive and document any misalignments and their resolutions. This allows you and your project team to reference those decisions later on. One way to document misalignments and resolutions is to create an appendix with a timestamp for new or updated information. An appendix is a section of additional content at the end of a document. A timestamp includes the date and sometimes the time of when the new content was created or added to the document. Awesome. Let's review some of the main ideas we've discussed. Anytime you communicate the details of a project, you need to think about your audience and what information is important to them. In the case of a project charter, your audience is made up of your stakeholders. A common cause of project failure is misalignment among stakeholders about the project details. It's important to take the time during the initiation phase to create a project charter that clearly lays out the key details of a project and to align with your stakeholders before the work begins. And finally, document any misalignments and their resolutions in your notes and the project charter to reference later on. Great job. In the next activity, you'll review supporting materials highlighting how PITA works with stakeholders to reach alignment on the project charter's details. Then you'll edit your project charter summary, goals, and deliverables based on the additional information you learn. This activity will demonstrate your ability to select key details from conversations that are relevant to a well-written project charter. You'll also have the opportunity to observe and learn as PITA guides the conversation toward an agreement. Once you've completed the activity, meet me in the next video. Welcome back. By now, you've drafted the project summary, goals, and deliverables in the project charter. And you've identified details in the project charter where stakeholders need to be in alignment. In this video, I'll review SMART goals and discuss how to add specificity to your project goals. I'll also share some tips for researching industry success metrics, which are helpful in adding specificity to your goals and deliverables. Being able to write specific, measurable goals is an important part of project management and a great way to demonstrate your project management skills to potential employers. Then, in the following activity, you'll review supporting materials and update the goals and deliverables you've drafted in the project charter to make them SMART. Ready to begin? Let's go. During the initiation phase, some of the project goals might be broad because not all of the project details have been determined. While it's okay to have broader goals, it's helpful to add specificity where possible. That's because clarifying project goals early on can help you avoid misalignment and gain a clearer understanding of the project's scope, budget, and timeline. Remember, project goals are the desired outcomes of the project. Outlining clear and specific goals is an important step in creating an effective project charter and crucial to launching a successful project. So you'll need to be able to accurately identify whether or not a goal has been met. When your goals are clear, you'll be able to determine your project deliverables. Project deliverables are specific tasks or outcomes that contribute to the completion of a goal. In your career as a project manager, you'll likely encounter stakeholders who only vaguely describe the outcomes they want for a given project. For example, a stakeholder might tell you that they'd like more customers to use a certain service, or they'd like to sell more units of a particular product. These are fine goals, but they're not very specific. You don't know how many more customers, what kind of customers, or how many units that you'll need in order to meet your goals. As a project manager, it's your role to ensure that the project goals are well defined so that you and your team have a clear roadmap. This not only allows you to focus, but also eliminates wasted time and miscommunication going forward. You can create clearly outlined goals with the help of the SMART method we discussed earlier in this program. The SMART method helps turn your project goals into SMART goals. Remember, this means your goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. These qualities can help you measure your success more accurately and allow you to make more precise adjustments along the way. Let's review some best practices for ensuring your project goals are also SMART goals. To make a goal more specific, make sure that it provides answers to questions like, what am I aiming to accomplish? And what are the requirements and constraints of this goal? Here's a tip I like to use to add specificity to goals. Look for words in your goals that might be subjective or based on an opinion, such as bigger, better, or faster. Once you've identified subjective words, connect with your stakeholders to agree on a definition of what it actually means to make something bigger, or better, or faster. What does bigger or better entail in practice? Faster by how much specifically? The SMART method helps you make your goals more specific by making them measurable. For example, if your stakeholder wants to increase company profits, ask, by how much? Do they want to increase profits by 5%? By 30%? Adding numbers and figures to your goal makes it a lot easier to know when you've achieved it. If you're having trouble making a goal measurable, research how others in your industry quantify success. This is called benchmarking, which refers to evaluating success against a standard. For example, there are lots of ways to measure success in the restaurant industry. You might search online for information using queries like, how do restaurants measure success? Or, how do you evaluate employee training sessions? You'll likely find a number of results. Some common metrics include table turnover rate, or the average length of time that a guest spends at their table, prime cost, which is the labor cost plus the total cost of goods like food and drink, and average check amount, which is the average amount of money guests spend on a given meal. Most industries, from the hospitality industry to the entertainment industry to the construction industry, will have their own metrics for success. That includes the tech industry too. Metrics are a big part of how we measure success here at Google. SMART goals are also attainable, which means that the goal is challenging but not impossible to reach. Ask yourself and the team, can it be done? Do you have the time, resources, and people available to complete the goal on time and within budget? If not, you'll need to make some changes to your goals. And all project goals should be relevant. Ask yourself, does it make sense for us as a company or as a project team to pursue this goal? One best practice for determining the relevance of your project goals is to notice how closely your project goals align with the wider goals of your company or organization. Here at Google, we use a tool for organization-wide goal setting called Objectives and Key Results, or OKRs. Other organizations might use a different term for their own goal setting. For us, OKRs combine a goal and a metric to determine a measurable outcome. For example, one of Sauce and Spoon's broader objectives is to make fresh, quick food for the working families in its community. So a relevant goal for the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout might be to decrease customer checkout time by 10% on average in the first 6 weeks after implementation. This project goal helps the restaurant chain reach its larger goal to provide quick meals for guests. And the last part of the SMART framework is to make your goal time-bound. You'll want to add a deadline to your goal so that you know when it's supposed to be completed. Okay, let's review. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. If your goals are SMART, you can feel confident about including them in your project charter. In the upcoming activity, you'll collect information from the supporting materials that will help you turn the goals you drafted into SMART goals. You'll also identify any additional goals and add them to the project charter. Okay, ready to get started? Let's get to work on the activity. Then, meet me in the next video to discuss scope, benefits, and costs. Welcome back. Now that you've updated the project charter and edited some of the project goals to make them SMART, it's time to discuss scope, benefits, and cost. Coming up, we'll explore what to think about when adding these items to your project charter. After this video, you'll review new supporting materials and use what you've learned to identify benefits and costs which you'll add to your charter. Let's get started. When thinking about what kind of information to include in a project charter, it's always good to consider the primary audience who will be reading it. And since the goal of creating a project charter is to communicate with your stakeholders, they're your primary audience. Here's an example. If you know that one of the benefits of your project would be of particular interest to a key stakeholder, you'll want to make sure to emphasize this benefit in your project charter. The stakeholders reading your charter might not see more detailed project plans and other documents later on, so it's important to get consensus on the critical elements now while the project details are still being finalized. You've already identified and hopefully resolved any misalignments about the project vision and goals. Next, you need to get aligned with your stakeholders on scope, benefits, and cost. We talked about scope earlier, but as a quick refresher, scope refers to the boundaries of the project. For example, the number of restaurants taking part in the pilot. Details that don't contribute to the project's goals are considered out of scope. To determine what's in and out of scope, think about what's needed to achieve the project goal. Keep the following questions in mind. Which project details are your stakeholders aligned on that would be considered in scope? Do your stakeholders disagree on any elements? Are there any details you should designate as out of scope for this particular project? As you think about these questions, take notes on what you find and refer to them as you complete the scope section of your project charter in the upcoming activity. After you've figured out the scope of your project, you'll need to focus on project benefits and costs. Benefits are the expected gains of a project. These can be direct monetary gains or indirect benefits, like an improvement in customer engagement or satisfaction. Costs refer to the money spent on project tasks and the prices of things like time, resources, and labor. Costs can be evaluated and managed using a project budget. A budget is an estimate of the amount of money allocated to complete the project. In the next activity, you'll need to review the supporting materials and take notes on details that can help you identify the benefits and costs of the tablet rollout. You'll use that information to add two lists to your project charter, a list of benefits and a list of costs. Usually, you can find the benefits the project will bring in the business case or project proposal. For example, your list of benefits for the tablet rollout might include its potential to speed up service and increase sales by an estimated %. Here's another benefit. The tablets will provide the restaurant with clear data points on customer ordering and an integrated point-of-sale system to help guide decision-making in the future. A list of benefits can help you identify potential project goals you might have missed. A list of costs will include items the organization will have to pay for in order to get the job done, like the price of labor or materials. Listing out costs helps your stakeholders weigh the benefits against the amount of money required to realize those benefits. You can build a list of costs by working with stakeholders to get estimates on labor, materials, and any other factors that might cost the business money during the project. Earlier, I told you that the benefits of a project should outweigh the costs. This is almost always the case when a project is initiated or proposed. When you add these details to the charter, it helps visualize them in one place and makes the costs and benefits crystal clear to the stakeholders. This section is used a lot as an aid to help make sure stakeholders agree that it's worth the money to pursue the project. Okay, let's recap. Scope refers to the boundaries of the project. Benefits refer to the expected gains of the project. And costs refer to the money spent on project tasks, plus the prices of things like time, resources, and labor. Ready to get back to your project charter? Head over to the activity where you'll review and analyze the supporting materials to identify the appropriate scope, benefits, and costs for the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout. Then, meet me in the next video where we'll discuss techniques for negotiating with stakeholders. See you soon.
The common problem that I see when you're in the initial phase of establishing the project is getting alignment between the key stakeholders, also securing the right people to take on the project, to incentivize your really talented project managers to want to join the project. I find that attraction is much more effective than promotion. So I want talent to come towards the project versus just assigning the project work. And that takes a lot of work. It's worth it because you're laying good foundation for a successful project and ultimately the best velocity you could expect. During the initiation phase, when I'm trying to refine the success criteria, I ask a lot of questions. There's probably a list of 20 of them. A couple examples could be, understanding the environment. What are some of the pitfalls or risks in the ecosystem? I would also try to understand, do survey interviews, people in the environment, asking them, what do you see as a problem? Also, I ask a series of quantitative questions where applicable to understand what am I dealing with in terms of measurables. There are a lot of reasons why projects may fail. In my opinion, it comes down to one, really poor project definition. Two, disorganization. The project lead is not establishing a framework to manage the project. And three, there's too many people. Often you have this effect where everyone will want to work on the project and then you don't have accountability. Not every stakeholder is going to come at the problem in the same perspective. So I step back and understand who are my key stakeholders. Let's just say, for example, there's two sponsors, the key stakeholders, and they're apples and oranges. That's a problem. So in that case, I'm going to have to meet with them a lot, understand, broker compromise, and really work through that initial project formation problem.
Hi again. By now, you've filled in most of your project charter, the summary, goals, and deliverables, scope, benefits, and costs. You've also learned more about the project and your stakeholders, who are the core audience of the charter. In this video, you'll learn how to prepare for some of the negotiations you'll have with stakeholders about your projects. We'll spend some time exploring stakeholders' individual interests, involvement, and contributions to the project. Then, we'll figure out how to use stakeholder influence to benefit the project and how to effectively work with stakeholders. Almost every part of a project requires input and agreement from multiple stakeholders. And of course, not all stakeholders will value the same input or agree on the same things. That's why a successful project manager needs to be a skilled negotiator too. After this video, you'll review supporting materials about the Sauce and Spoon project stakeholders to write a persuasive email demonstrating your negotiation skills. Let's get started. As we discussed earlier in the program, some common project aspects that are negotiated during the course of a project include scope, costs and benefits, timeline, success criteria, roles and responsibilities, and resources. This is another reason getting aligned with stakeholders early on is helpful. Good alignment can help prevent some of these types of negotiations down the road. Early in the project, it's important to agree on the scope. Take note of how PETA focuses on securing stakeholder buy-in for that. And it's good to remember that a lot of the skills she'll apply here will be useful to negotiating other elements throughout the project's lifecycle, whether that's the budget, timeline, or product requirements. You'll prepare for this and future negotiations by creating a stakeholder analysis. The stakeholder analysis is a visual representation of all of the stakeholders. It helps you understand who your stakeholders are, what their priorities are, and how they prefer to communicate. It can help you determine how strongly you need to prioritize a particular stakeholder's needs or goals on the project. Stakeholders have a vested interest in the project's success. Understanding your stakeholders helps you figure out the right people to include in important conversations and how to prioritize the different needs of the different stakeholders. This is key to getting the support you need throughout the project. As part of your analysis, try to answer as many questions as you can about each stakeholder. Then, as you review your list, identify which stakeholders directly influence the project and the level of interest each one has. A stakeholder's influence is related to how much power they have and how much their actions affect the project outcome. Interest refers to how much the stakeholder's needs will be affected by project operations and outcomes. So, for example, if a stakeholder has high interest and high influence, it might be very important that you keep them informed and make sure their goals for the project are top priority. If they have low interest and low influence, then you might be able to deprioritize one of their personal preferences for the project. Mapping these out on a power interest grid will give you even more clarity about whom to prioritize and how best to approach negotiations with each stakeholder. You'll find a stakeholder analysis template in Power Interest Grid in the supporting materials of the upcoming activity. Once you have a good idea of who your stakeholders are and what role they play in the project's success, you can use this information to support your project negotiations. One of the most important negotiations will deal with defining and maintaining project scope. Stakeholders might push to add more into the scope, and it's your job as the project manager to negotiate what's realistic within the given budget and timeline expectations. Okay, let's review. Some common project negotiations you're likely to have with stakeholders include aspects of the charter, like costs and benefits and success criteria, as well as other project aspects, like roles and responsibilities and project resources. You can prepare for these negotiations by conducting a stakeholder analysis using a Power Interest Grid. Coming up, you'll review supporting materials and complete a stakeholder analysis for the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout. After you complete the activity, meet me in the next video. Great to see you again. In the last activity, you completed the stakeholder analysis and mapped out which stakeholders have the most power, influence, and interest in the project's outcome. Having a better understanding of the people who will be evaluating the success of your project makes it so much easier to strategize the best ways to communicate with them and get the support you need. So coming up, we'll learn more about how to successfully navigate a negotiation with stakeholders. As a project manager, you've got a lot of helpful tools at your disposal, but even the most skilled negotiators have to put their skills to the test in order to meet project goals and gain stakeholder satisfaction. There will be times when you need to negotiate a sensitive aspect of the project's goals or scope. Or there could be a disagreement among stakeholders, or you might disagree with something that stakeholders want. You'll need to use negotiating techniques to move a disagreement from stalemate to solution. After this video, you'll identify shared benefits for your stakeholders that you'll eventually use to write a negotiation email. Let's get started. When it comes to project management, persuasion and negotiation are constructive tools you can use to enhance communication, clarify wants and needs, and achieve workable solutions for everyone involved. Being skilled at persuasion and negotiation will also boost your level of influence. It's important that you view the people you're negotiating with as your colleagues and peers, not as opponents. That's why you do a stakeholder analysis, so you can get to know your stakeholders as people with their own jobs and responsibilities, and as partners who want the project to succeed. When you experience conflict or disagreement among your stakeholders, it's in your best interest to address those challenges, build consensus among the stakeholder groups, and de-escalate conflict. One way to do this is to find solutions that are mutually beneficial. Mutual benefit is when all parties involved gain some kind of benefit or advantage. For example, let's say there's a disagreement over how many people to hire for a project. You'd like to hire 5, but a stakeholder wants to limit the headcount to 3. A solution that would offer mutual benefit might be to install automated software to pick up some of the work. Or another solution might be to adjust the timeline or expectations so that 5 people aren't needed in order to reach the project goal. The stakeholder gets to have their desired smaller team size, and you're able to complete tasks with fewer people. The goal here is to reach a solution that maximizes benefits, minimizes losses, and is fair for all. Brainstorm all possible options that meet this criteria. Then, during your negotiations, you'll be able to present multiple alternatives and choose one that benefits everyone to some degree. Now, as much as you want to satisfy your stakeholders, it's just as important to think about what trade-offs you're willing to make. To do this successfully, you need a clear understanding of project priorities. You have to know what's most important when it comes to scope, timeline, and budget. For example, if there's a specific deadline that has to be met, then you'll need to negotiate any changes to the scope that might cause the project to go past that deadline. If the product needs to look or function a certain way, then the requirements are a top priority, and you could negotiate aspects of the budget or timeline in order to adhere to the scope. A common tool used for determining priorities is the triple constraint model, or the iron triangle, which we covered in an earlier course. The triple constraint will help you decide if a project request is acceptable and what impact it'll have. Okay, let's review. Persuasion and negotiation are constructive tools you can use to enhance communication, clarify wants and needs, and achieve workable solutions for everyone involved. The goal is to reach a mutual benefit, which is when all parties involved gain some kind of benefit or advantage. That's it for now. Coming up, you'll prepare for negotiations about the project scope. To do this, you'll identify the mutual benefits and evaluate the impact of compromising on scope. Once you're done, I'll meet up with you in the next video. See you soon.
Hi, I'm Stanton, and I'm a program manager at YouTube. A program manager at YouTube basically works on a lot of different projects, but puts them all together into a program that can help people understand what's going on at any given time, whether that's development or product requirements or testing. All that needs to come together for a project to work well. Scope change can happen at any time, and I found that often happens when you don't want it to happen, usually right before a launch. So this is a project that I was working on at a startup before I came to YouTube. We were implementing a new app that had to do with body weight percentages. Managing stakeholders is really important as a program manager because the stakeholders might not always know what's going on. And in this case, with our CEO, he was really focused on getting us to launch, thinking about all the PR and the marketing and everything that he was going to announce once everything went live. He saw that specific thing with the graphs and really wanted it changed. This is something that happens a lot. You can get a requirements change at the very last minute. You kind of find some ways to make sure that your client or stakeholders are still happy with what you can produce. So in this case, what we ended up doing is we went back to our developers. We got an estimate for how long they thought making that change would actually take. And that actually brought us way beyond the timelines that we had in mind. So we came up with a few different proposals. And what ended up happening was because the launch date was set, there was no way we'd be able to make all the changes that he wanted in time for launch. So instead we negotiated and said, hey, we'll have it this way at launch, but based on the estimates that we received, we'll be able to get this done in another 2 weeks, and we'll just do another release after that. It shouldn't be a big deal. It'll just be a change after the initial launch. And when you're dealing with stakeholders, there's always going to be some things that they want to get done more than other things. And so when you're managing scope, especially if something last minute comes along, you can kind of try to stack rank it within that priority level, right? The one thing I would also add and caution about too is you can't get anything for free. So if you do have a change in scope, you need to make sure to go back and look at that priority and see what actually gets pushed out because of the new thing getting brought in. They come to you because you're project manager or program manager. You understand all the things that are happening on the ground. And I think that's the power that you have in this role.
Welcome back. So far, you've identified mutual benefits and their impacts to scope, timeline, and budget. In this video, you'll learn how to apply influence and constructive power to stakeholder negotiations. Then, you'll use this knowledge to identify stakeholders who'd be helpful in supporting your position in upcoming negotiations. We talked earlier about how the ability to influence is such a key element of effective project management. You might remember an earlier video where we covered 4 steps to effective influencing. Dr. J. Conger lists these 4 steps to effectively influence: establish credibility, frame for common ground, provide evidence, and connect emotionally. One way to apply all 4 of these steps is to form a coalition. A coalition is a temporary alliance or partnering of individuals or groups in order to achieve a common purpose or to engage in a joint activity. When 2 or more people advocate together for an idea, they're able to exert more influence than if they attempted to act alone. Forming a coalition with the right group of people is a powerful and effective negotiation technique. For example, think about some of the key stakeholders you identified earlier from the Sauce and Spoon project. Which ones could you form a coalition with to help you negotiate one of the out-of-scope items that was requested? Creating a coalition boosts your credibility by involving others who support your goal. The people in your coalition can help you find common ground and provide evidence. Plus, you can connect emotionally by including someone who either has a positive relationship with the stakeholder or understands the stakeholder and the goal well enough to make a connection. An effective coalition includes people with the right mix of influence or power and interest. In other words, identify people who can help you achieve your goal through their vested interest and expertise on the subject of your project. You'll also want to balance your coalition with people who have a high level of power in your organization to help influence and get things done. A stakeholder analysis is a useful tool to help guide coalition building. Once you've decided who's a good fit for your coalition, reach out to them and ask for their support. A good way to do this is through a well-crafted email, but you could also ask in person or with a phone call, whichever method you think is most appropriate. When you make your request, clearly state the issue you're attempting to resolve. Explain which aspect of the project is being negotiated. Then, ask if they might consider supporting your position or solution and state what that is. And of course, refer to that person's sources of power or interest you identified. For example, if you're negotiating the timing of the project, you might say something like, "The timing of the launch will affect business hours, and your experience managing restaurant projects year-round could be helpful in explaining why this factor needs to be reconsidered." This will let them know that you value them, why it impacts them, and why you think they can be of specific help to you. Let's recap the main ideas. The ability to influence is a big part of project management. There are 4 steps to effective influencing as identified by Dr. J. Conger. Establish credibility, frame for common ground, provide evidence, and connect emotionally. One way to gain influence is to form a coalition. A coalition is a temporary alliance or partnering of groups in order to achieve a common purpose or to engage in a joint activity. An effective coalition includes people with the right mix of power and interest. You'll want to play to those strengths when forming a coalition and influencing members of the coalition. Great. Now you've prepared for future negotiations. Up next, you'll use what you learned about coalition building and write a persuasive email to influence these stakeholders to join the coalition. Once you're finished, meet me in the next video. Hi, and congrats on making it to the end of this section. Let's take a moment to review what you've accomplished so far. You started by analyzing documents, conducting research, and applying strategic thinking to complete the project charter for Sauce and Spoon's tablet rollout project. Next, you used the project charter as a tool to align the project's scope and goals among key stakeholders. Then, you completed your own stakeholder analysis and learned how to use one when preparing for project negotiations. You also identified aspects of a project that often require negotiation, along with aspects that provide benefits that could support a mutually beneficial agreement that works for all stakeholders. And finally, you applied your knowledge of power and interest to identify people to be part of a coalition aimed at persuading stakeholders to a certain viewpoint. Defining and getting stakeholders aligned with the details, negotiating project scope and goals, and being able to effectively influence others are super important to getting off to a successful start in any project. It's here in the beginning that you want to get clear on what you're setting out to accomplish with the project. That way, you'll be able to accurately track the project's progress and feel confident that you're working within the time frame and budget allowed. Being able to practice these concepts, create project documentation, and apply this knowledge will help you prepare for job interviews and become a great project manager. Coming up next, you'll continue to learn from Peta in her role as project manager for Sauce and Spoon. In the upcoming activities, you'll take the work you've done here and move into the planning phase of the project to build out a project plan with tasks and milestones. Meet you there. Welcome back. So far, you should have completed a project charter for Sauce and Spoon's tablet rollout. The project charter helps you organize vital project information, create a framework for the work that needs to be done, and communicate those details to the necessary people. Once the project charter is created and confirmed, you'll use it to start the project planning stage. In the upcoming activities, we'll be progressing from the initiation phase of the project lifecycle to the planning phase. Here, you'll put your knowledge and skills to work on a project plan, which is the central artifact a project manager builds during the planning phase. Most projects capture requirements in this artifact, so the project plan you build for Sauce and Spoon will be a critical part of your project management portfolio. It will demonstrate your ability to break a large project into a set of achievable, smaller tasks. Before we get started, let's review the project scenario. Sauce and Spoon is a small but growing chain of restaurants with 5 locations. They've hired Peta as their first in-house project manager to launch the pilot of tabletop tablet menus at 2 of their locations. Throughout the course, you'll observe Peta as she works to complete this project in scope, on time and within budget. You'll create project management documents based on this scenario, just as you would if you were the project manager. As you work through these materials, you may want to take notes about project details in order to complete some of the activities. The project management documents you create will help you practice your skills by applying them to a real-world scenario. These documents will also provide you with a portfolio to speak to during a future job interview. In the next group of activities, you'll analyze conversations, emails, and other forms of documentation to build out a project plan. As you continue on, you'll identify tasks and milestones within the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout. You'll also demonstrate effective communication techniques, like asking the right questions and practicing empathy, which will help you make accurate time estimates for each task. Ready to get started? Meet me in the next video. Hi there. In this video, you'll learn to analyze project documentation, including documents from previous projects, to identify tasks for a new project. This documentation includes project charters, emails, and old project plans, which a business may have available when you join a new organization or switch to a new project. Then, in the upcoming activity, you'll begin building the project plan for Sauce and Spoon's tablet rollout by adding project tasks to a spreadsheet that will serve as your project plan. I recommend that you use the provided project plan template to start your document, but you're also welcome to create your own spreadsheet or use your preferred project management software. Let's get started. First, we'll review the purpose and function of a project plan. A project plan is useful for any project, big or small, since it helps you document the scope, tasks, milestones, budget, and overall activities in order to keep the project on track. At the center of the project plan is the project schedule. The schedule is your guide for making time estimates for project tasks, determining milestones, and monitoring the overall progress of the project. One of your main jobs as a project manager is to identify all of the project tasks, estimate how much time each task will take, and track each task's progress. So how do you go about adding tasks and milestones to the plan for the very first time? The first thing I do is review the goals and deliverables in the project charter. Then, I make a list of all the items that have tasks or milestones associated with them. As a reminder, milestones are important points within the schedule that indicate progress. They usually signify the completion of a deliverable or phase of the project. And project tasks refer to activities that need to be accomplished within a set period of time. They're assigned to different members of the team according to each person's role and skills. In order to reach a milestone, you and your team must complete certain tasks. For example, one of the deliverables of the Sauce and Spoon project is promoting the new tablet menus with table signs and email blasts. In this instance, a milestone could be the completion of this deliverable, which would include all of the tasks that are required for getting sign-offs on the final versions of the marketing materials and confirming the dates of the email blasts. Some of these tasks would include writing multiple drafts of the different marketing materials, generating an email list, and programming the emails to be sent on the correct dates. For each deliverable, ask yourself, what steps do we need to take in order to achieve this? The steps will become the individual tasks that need to be completed. Let's turn our attention to another deliverable for Sauce and Spoon, the implementation of a post-dining survey to assess customer satisfaction. What steps do you need to take in order to achieve this deliverable? You might need to assign a team member to develop a survey. You'll also need to determine how you'll deliver the survey and create a process for carrying it out. These are just a couple of examples of the many tasks you'll need to complete in order to achieve the deliverable. It's your job to help uncover the rest of the tasks. How do you uncover more tasks? In addition to the project charter, there are other common forms of documentation that can help you identify tasks. For example, you might ask your stakeholders or colleagues to share emails or an older project plan for a similar project. Let's discuss how these might be useful as you build your list of tasks. Emails that relate to the project can provide lots of helpful information for you to pull tasks from. Since so much communication in the workplace happens over email, ask to have relevant emails that contain discussions about the project's details forwarded to you. These emails can help you uncover tasks, and they can also help you identify team members to connect with further if you have additional questions. It's also helpful to review an older project plan for a similar initiative to find out what kind of tasks were included. For example, if you are a project manager tasked with launching a new product, you might ask a colleague with experience launching other products for the same company to share their project plan as an example. Or, if your project includes some construction work, you might ask colleagues about unrelated projects that also had construction components. Previous project plans can provide helpful inspiration as you create your own list of tasks. They can also help you identify possible task durations, subject matter experts, and even suppliers that may be helpful to your project. As you review project documentation, take note of information that suggests other tasks your team will need to complete in order to execute on project deliverables. During this process, ask yourself questions like, is there a large task being worked on by many people that could be broken into smaller tasks assigned to individuals? Are there signals that imply prior tasks need to be completed first? For example, a deliverable like install tablets might imply selecting a tablet vendor as a prior task. Great! We've covered a lot in this video, so let's review. The project plan helps document the scope, tasks, milestones, budget, and overall activities in order to keep the project on track. To add tasks to your plan, search for useful information from existing project documentation, such as the project charter, email threads, and old project plans from a similar project. As you review project documentation, take note of information that suggests additional tasks and milestones that your team will need to complete in order to meet project deliverables. Great! In the next activity, you'll review the supporting materials to start building the Sauce and Spoon project plan. Once you're finished, I'll meet you in the next video. Welcome back. By now, you should have analyzed existing project documentation to identify a list of tasks related to the Sauce and Spoon tablet pilot. In this video, I'll share a few tips for conducting online research, which is a helpful strategy for gathering domain knowledge. Domain knowledge refers to knowledge of a specific industry, topic, or activity. If you're unfamiliar with a new project's domain, then analyzing supporting project documentation will help you broaden your knowledge. There will be times throughout your career when you'll be new to an organization or industry. You might be assigned to a project that's unlike anything you've ever managed before. And that's okay. New challenges can be a really exciting part of the job. So how do you identify tasks and monitor progress for a project or industry that you're not familiar with? Another key to success when working on an unfamiliar project is knowing where to find useful information that can help you increase your domain knowledge. Here's an example. Let's say you've been hired to manage projects in the private banking industry. In order to successfully manage these projects, you'll need a basic understanding of how private banking works. This includes things like how clients open accounts, back office operations, and how trade confirmations are verified. And in the case of Sauce and Spoon, you'll need a base-level understanding of the restaurant industry, some of which you've already come across during this course, like knowing about guest averages and table turn times. Again, you don't need to be an expert on your project, but becoming more familiar with different industries and types of projects is a valuable skill that demonstrates your versatility. Having industry knowledge can also save you time on future projects within that industry, since you won't have to ask as many questions or do as much research. That said, if you're new to an industry or organization, no one will expect you to have all the answers right away. One way to help build up your domain knowledge when you get started with project planning is through online research. Online research can help increase your knowledge of industry terms, techniques, processes, and more, all of which can be helpful as you embark on a new project. This allows you to read up on how other organizations have managed similar projects. It's also an opportunity to draw inspiration from their successes and to learn from their mistakes. So, what should you be aiming for as you do research for a given project? Let's go over a few tips that can help you get started. First, try searching online for news coverage of similar projects at other companies. For example, you might search for news articles that focus on restaurant groups who've added tablet ordering capabilities to their restaurant locations. Experiment with search terms like menu tablet news or restaurant tablet news to find relevant news articles. As you read, take notes on interesting findings. Did the company experience any surprising outcomes following their product's launch? Did they come across any unanticipated roadblocks? If so, make note of these and decide if there are tasks that you should add to your project in order to achieve similar results or to avoid similar roadblocks. Identifying where similar successes or mistakes might play out in your own project can help you uncover tasks that you may have otherwise overlooked. It's also helpful to search online for research on topics related to your project. For example, you might search for phrases like restaurant tablet research or digital menu ordering. Adding search tags like best practices or key takeaways can help streamline your search results. Then, you can review the relevant research for information that might help inform your project planning. You can also try researching similar projects in other industries. This can be especially helpful when you're new to a project or industry. For example, even though your project may center around tablet usage in a restaurant setting, you can also learn about the installation process from research on tablet usage in similar settings, like retail stores or coffee shops. The details will be different, but similar projects in other industries can be a helpful source of ideas. Once you've done some initial online research, review the list of tasks that you've identified so far and research the specifics of executing that work. For example, maybe one of the tasks on your list is choosing the tablet model that you'll ultimately install in the restaurants. Are there any smaller subtasks your team will need to complete to decide on a tablet model? Searching online can help to uncover any additional tasks you'll need to account for. Well done! Let's recap what we learned in this video. Online research can help you increase your domain knowledge of industry terms, techniques, processes, and more. When you conduct your online research, keep the following tips in mind. Search for news articles about similar projects at other companies, research similar projects in other industries, and finally, review your list of tasks and research the specifics of executing that work. Ready to get started? Head over to the next activity where you'll perform online research to identify more tasks and milestones for the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout. I'll meet you in the next video. Welcome back. In the last video, I shared some tips for conducting online research to help improve your domain knowledge and discover tasks to add to your project plan. In this video, you'll learn how to identify more tasks by analyzing key conversations related to the project. The Sauce and Spoon project is fairly complex and will result in a project plan with many tasks. Populating your plan with a set of tasks can indicate to future employers that you're able to identify key areas of work based on documentation, research, conversations, and more. It can also demonstrate that you're able to synthesize these tasks into a single organized document, which is a critical part of project management. Reviewing project documentation and researching your project online can help you identify tasks, but that won't tell you everything you need to know. Discussions with other people working on the project, from stakeholders to team members, can help you uncover tasks that you're still missing or clarify the smaller subtasks. Let's start with tips for identifying tasks through group conversations with members of your project team. One way to discover more tasks is to hold a group brainstorm session with team members who will likely work on those tasks. For example, PETA might meet with the Sauce and Spoon project team to brainstorm potential challenges that the waitstaff and guests might have with the tablets. Discussing these as a group can help identify ideas for tasks that may have been overlooked. Another way to discover tasks is to hold one-on-one conversations with team members about tasks they'll likely be responsible for completing. For example, you might have a discussion with a vendor who specializes in training restaurant employees to determine how to prepare for the training. Or you might reach out to a graphic designer to discuss creating new marketing materials. Your team, outside vendors, and company executives have specific expertise and job experience that gives them a deeper understanding of the work required to complete tasks or reach milestones. Through conversations with teammates, you might learn that certain tasks are more complex than you assumed, or that you're missing a key step of a given process. In this case, leverage the expertise of your teammates to discover what you don't know and to fill in gaps in your list of tasks. In addition to connecting with teammates to uncover project tasks, it may also be helpful to consult with other people in your organization who are experts on given tasks. Though these people may not be involved in your project, they may be able to provide valuable expertise that can help you identify processes and fill in gaps. Once you've connected with members of your project team and other experts in your organization, examine your list of tasks. Are there still areas where you need more information? If so, it may be helpful to have a conversation with your key stakeholders to fill in any gaps. As we've discussed, senior stakeholders are often busy with other aspects of their jobs, so you should be strategic about who to ask for a conversation. Stakeholders who have high or medium level interest or influence in the project are most likely to provide the information you need. Some examples include stakeholders who are subject matter experts and those who are directly affected by the outcome of the project, like your team's leadership. You can refer back to your stakeholder analysis for help deciding who would be best to connect with. Once you've identified which stakeholders would be most helpful, make sure you're prepared by gathering as much information as possible ahead of your conversation and outlining clear, outstanding questions that you still need answers to. During the conversation, present your research and your current list of tasks, and explain exactly how they can help you move forward. This will give your stakeholder a clear picture of what you've accomplished so far and help them to identify gaps or missing tasks that are required to achieve your goal. Ample preparation helps ensure that you can get the information you need while respecting the limited time of your stakeholders. Keep in mind that conversations you have about project tasks will often contain more details and information than you need to create a thorough list, but you may want to note some of this extra information since it may be useful later in the project. Each task on your list should be detailed enough that you'll be able to check in on progress and identify problems early on, but not so detailed that you're endlessly revising your project plan and burdening your team with the need to update you constantly on their work. The right level of detail to include in your task list will vary from project to project and team to team. and striking the right balance is a skill you'll develop over the course of your career. Okay, let's do a quick recap. Discussions with other people working on the project can help you uncover missing tasks or clarify smaller subtasks. Some ways to uncover tasks include brainstorming with team members assigned to similar or related tasks, holding one-on-one conversations with team members about tasks, consulting with other people in your organization who are experts on given tasks, and having conversations with stakeholders. The right level of detail to include in your task list will vary from project to project and team to team. As a project manager, a key part of your role is identifying the right level of detail and then synthesizing it into a clear, concise list of tasks in the project plan. In the upcoming activity, you'll review the supporting materials to uncover more task details and add them to the Sauce and Spoon project plan. Head to the activity to get started and then meet me in the next video. Welcome back. So far, you've identified and added tasks to your project plan. You've gathered information from relevant project documentation, online research, and other people on the project team. In this video, I'll discuss how to order your task list and share several techniques for identifying milestones. Maybe you've already identified a few milestones on your own. These techniques will be helpful to keep in mind when you're working through the activity after this video. Let's start with ordering your task list. By now, you should have a long list of project tasks. To finalize the list, review what you have so far. Check for any remaining larger tasks that could still be broken down into smaller subtasks, and add those tasks to your list. When you think you've listed all the necessary project tasks in your project plan, the next step is to arrange the tasks in the order that they need to be completed. Determining the proper task order will help you assign start and end dates for each task. When determining priority, first consider the basic order of operations. In other words, what is the natural sequence of tasks? Are there any dependencies or prerequisites? For example, you can't train staff on how to use the tablets before they've been installed and tested. To help you order tasks, you can have a conversation with your team to uncover dependencies or prerequisites from each person who owns a task. You might ask each person what needs to happen before they can start their work. Similarly, you can search the internet for information with terms such as prerequisites for launching new hardware. After you've thought through the order, adjust the tasks in your project plan to reflect this order. To do this, simply rearrange the spreadsheet rows to set the order for your tasks. For example, the task of researching different models of menu tablets needs to happen before the task of signing a contract with a menu tablet supplier. Makes sense, right? You probably wouldn't want to sign a contract with the supplier before you'd researched every possible option. Once your tasks are in order, you'll begin identifying milestones. Remember that milestones are important points within the project schedule that indicate progress. Milestones usually signify the completion of a deliverable or phase of the project. To determine milestones within your list of tasks, identify points in the project plan where you and your team can evaluate the work completed so far. For example, if there are multiple tasks related to menu tablet installation, a milestone might be the first internal test run of the tablet's ordering capabilities. These types of milestones may be the same as some of the deliverables you listed earlier. Another way to determine milestones is to identify important tasks that your stakeholders have a particular interest in. To do this, review your notes from previous conversations with stakeholders and identify tasks that stakeholders seemed eager to know more about or wanted to review when complete. If your stakeholder has a high interest in a given task or point in the project, label that task as a milestone. For example, one of the Sauce and Spoon stakeholders might be interested in knowing when a tablet supplier has been selected, since that decision will impact the budget. As you review your list, you should also identify tasks that carry a high risk or signal the completion of a phase or major task. These tasks are often considered milestones because they have a major impact on the project's overall progress. For example, the first successful test run of the menu tablet's ordering capabilities might be considered a milestone. Amazing job! Let's review. Once you've listed all of the necessary tasks in your project plan, you'll need to rearrange the tasks in the order in which your team needs to complete them. It's also important to consider the natural sequence of tasks, as well as the dependencies or prerequisites for each task. Once your tasks are in order, you'll need to identify milestones. When determining milestones, it's crucial to identify the points in the project plan where you can evaluate the work completed so far, identify the tasks that stakeholders have a particular interest in, and identify tasks that carry a high risk or signal the completion of a phase or major task. Okay, ready to get back into your project plan? Head to the next activity to reorder your list of project tasks and identify your project milestones. Then, meet me in the next video where I'll take you through adding time estimates to each task. Hi again! In the last few videos, you learned how to identify project tasks and milestones by analyzing project documents, conducting online research, and having conversations with teammates, stakeholders, and subject matter experts. In this video, I'll review some strategies for getting accurate time estimates for your tasks and milestones. Then, in the upcoming activities, you'll analyze supporting materials and apply strategic thinking to get estimates for the Sauce and Spoon tablet project. Let's get started. Time estimation is a prediction of the total amount of time required to complete a task. Providing time estimates for each task gives you a better sense of the overall project timeline in relation to individual deadlines and milestones. Knowing the estimated duration of a task also lets you easily track its progress, so you can recognize if the task is likely to go over the estimated time. That way, you'll be better able to project the timeline and quickly make any necessary adjustments. As I mentioned earlier, you won't necessarily be an expert on the projects you manage initially. On top of reviewing project documentation and doing some research, you'll also need the help of your team and other subject matter experts to fill in some of the details and provide input. Asking the right questions can help your experts get to the most accurate time estimates possible. Let's go over some strategies for getting accurate time estimates from your task experts. First, check their understanding of the task. Ask the expert to explain all the detailed steps involved in the task. You won't include every detail in the project plan, but by having the expert do this, you're getting them to thoroughly think through the work involved before providing you with an estimate. Next, ask for estimates of the sub-steps and make note of them. Then, add them all up and compare that total with the expert's estimate of the total time needed to complete the task. Another strategy is to discuss the assumptions the expert might be making when they give you an estimate. For example, what equipment do they assume they'll have? What kind of supplies? How many people do they assume are working on the task? What are their assumptions about the skill and experience level of the people working alongside them on the task? Then, ask the task expert to consider how likely it might be that all or some of these assumptions might not work out, and how that might impact their estimate. One important detail to clarify here is the difference between an effort estimate and a total duration estimate. An effort estimate only takes into account the actual time it takes to complete a task. A total duration estimate accounts for the effort estimation and any other factors, like getting approvals, prep work, testing, and so on. For example, imagine one of your tasks is designing and launching the checkout page for the tablet. The effort estimation for designing the page might be 8 hours, which is the amount of time it takes to mock up and implement the design. But the total duration of the task includes testing, feedback, and approvals needed to launch. That means that the total time estimate for the checkout page is actually more than 8 hours. Finally, another strategy for getting accurate estimates is to compare the expert's estimates against the actual time spent on similar tasks in previous work. Ask the expert to think about a similar project they worked on and describe what was different and what was the same. Ask how long that project took and whether thinking about that project changes their estimate at all. Okay, let's review what we just covered. Time estimation is a prediction of the total amount of time required to complete a task. Providing estimates for each task gives you a big picture sense of the project timeline in relation to individual deadlines and milestones. And asking the right questions can help your experts get to the most accurate estimate possible. Try checking their understanding of the task, or ask for estimates of the substeps. Discuss assumptions and compare the expert's estimates against the actual time spent on similar tasks in previous work. In the next video, I'll share another strategy for getting accurate time estimates called the 3-point method. Then, in an upcoming activity, you'll add time estimates to the Sauce and Spoon project plan. Meet you there. Hi again. I've got one more technique for figuring out accurate time estimates. It's called 3-point estimating. 3-point estimating is used to help determine the most realistic time estimate for a task. It uses optimistic and pessimistic calculations, meaning calculations based on the best case and the worst case scenarios. A side benefit to this strategy is that it takes into account potential risks that could impact not only the task estimation, but other aspects of the project like budget and resources. Just as the name implies, in 3-point estimating, there are 3 parts of the estimate to examine. Here's how it works. Each task receives 3 time estimates: optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic. Each estimate indicates the projected amount of time a task will take under that category, and how likely any potential risks are to occur. An optimistic estimate assumes the best-case scenario. Issues will not occur, and the task will be completed within the estimated time. In other words, it's how long you hope the task will take, assuming everything goes as planned. For example, if all the supplies needed for a task come in early and everything works the way it's supposed to. A most likely estimate assumes some issues might occur. Another way to think about a most likely estimate is that it is based on how long the task usually takes under normal circumstances. Like if the supplies arrive at the expected time and you only need to make some slight adjustments before everything eventually works the way it's supposed to. And finally, a pessimistic estimate assumes that issues will definitely occur. This is where everything that could go wrong does go wrong. For example, if the supplies are late, or the order is incorrect and nothing works the way it's supposed to. When determining estimates using this technique, you'll need to ask your task experts questions or conduct research that will help you understand best and worst case scenarios. Then, add these notes to the plan for each task. Let's try out 3-point estimating with an example from the Sauce and Spoon project, the task of training the staff to use the tablets. You ask the person tasked with arranging the staff training to give you a time estimate in each category, and to describe the conditions for each. The task expert tells you that the conditions for an optimistic estimate would mean the vendor who is hired to do training is well qualified, has all the materials they need, and shows up on time to deliver the training. All of the staff shows up on time and successfully completes the training within the scheduled amount of time. All of the equipment works for the staff to practice on. In this best-case scenario, your task expert estimates 4 hours, 2 hours to conduct the training, and 1 hour each for setup and post-training review on the originally scheduled date. In a most likely scenario, the task expert assumes that the vendor is qualified but might not have all the necessary materials, so they'll need to modify something, or someone on the restaurant staff will need to find some supplies. Or the vendor might be new and need extra time to prepare or take longer to deliver the training. Usually, a couple of staff members can't attend or be on time, so extra training time would need to be scheduled. There could also be some minor glitches with the equipment, and the training might need to be rescheduled for a different day later in the week. The time estimate in this case is closer to 6 hours, and the date is likely to get changed to 2 or 3 days later than originally planned. Under pessimistic conditions, you could have a situation where the original training vendor quits and a new vendor has to be hired. There could be several unexpected staff no-shows or turnover right before the training. Or possibly the equipment doesn't get delivered on time or doesn't work, so the training can't happen until the new equipment arrives. In this case, the actual training time is still around 6 hours, but the date has to be rescheduled for up to a full week later than originally planned. When conducting your own research or having conversations with task experts, be mindful of the 3 points so that you can determine the outcomes of optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic timing. If someone quotes you a time estimate, don't just take their word for it without understanding the context they're estimating from. Think about it this way. If someone is being optimistic, they might estimate that a task will only take them 2 days to complete. If you go with that estimate and it ends up taking a whole week, your schedule is off. But if someone is being pessimistic and quotes 1 month and the task only takes a week, then you've got extra time in your schedule that could have gone toward other tasks or led to an earlier product release. Always accounting for a worst-case scenario might seem like a good thing, but it's actually wasteful if you calculate most of your estimates this way. So, you want to examine the best and worst-case scenario timing and compare these with the most likely scenario. From there, you can build in a buffer that accounts for risks that are likely, but still keeps the project progressing at an efficient rate. Okay, let's review. 3-point estimating is a technique to help determine the most realistic time estimate for a task. It uses optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic calculations. 3-point estimating takes a little more work, but it gives you a clearer sense of what's possible with each task, so you can make a more realistic and accurate estimate. There are even formulas to help you quantify these estimates that we won't get into here, but we encourage you to check out in the course readings. In the next activity, you'll review the supporting materials where PETA has had conversations with some of the Sauce and Spoon project task experts. Then, you'll come up with time estimates for the tasks they discussed and add them to your project plan. Welcome back. Earlier, we discussed how to get accurate time estimates from your experts. In this video, we'll discuss how to determine a confidence level rating for each of your estimates. A confidence level rating indicates how confident you are in an estimate's accuracy. Being able to share these ratings with stakeholders is helpful because they indicate how likely it is that a task will be completed in the amount of time estimated. Estimating is not a perfect science, so adding a confidence level rating for a task allows you to address any uncertainty. In an upcoming activity, you'll finish calculating your time estimates and add confidence level ratings to your tasks in the Sauce and Spoon project plan. Let's get started. A confidence level rating ranges from high, meaning you're very confident in your estimate, to low, meaning you're not very confident in your estimate. Knowing the confidence level of your estimate and adding notes about any risks or issues that might affect the estimate can help you identify whether you should ask the project team for their input. They might be able to point out the estimates or tasks you should track more closely. Additionally, if you notice that your confidence is low across a large percentage of task estimates, you might want to communicate your uncertainty about the project timeline to stakeholders. There are a few ways to determine a confidence level rating. Using the 3-point technique we just discussed is one way of gaining confidence in your estimates. If you can show that you've considered the best and worst case conditions for a task, then your confidence level rating for that task's time estimate would be high, since you have a thorough understanding of the task. Another way to determine a confidence rating is by polling your team about the tasks they're assigned and coming to a consensus about your collective confidence. To do this, you could calculate their level of confidence as a percentage, which means polling everyone on their estimates and calculating the average confidence level. You might find that they're 90% confident, which would mean you have an overall high confidence rating. Or maybe they're only 60% confident, which would mean you have a medium confidence rating. Or you could define categories for the team. For example, we've never done a project like this before, we've done this once before, we've done this a handful of times, and we've done this a ton of times already. Each category correlates to your confidence level. If they've never done the project before, or have only done it once, then the confidence rating for the time estimate might be low. Estimating is far from an exact science, particularly in project management, when there are so many unknowns. Implementing a system that accounts for those unknowns and ensures an accurate picture of the project timeline means everyone will be better off over the long term. Okay, let's review what we've covered. A confidence level rating indicates how confident you are in an estimate's accuracy. You can determine confidence ratings in a few ways, including polling your team on the tasks they're assigned to, or by defining categories. And remember, estimating is far from an exact science, particularly in project management when there are so many unknowns. Implementing a system that accounts for those unknowns and ensures an accurate picture of project costs means everyone will be better off over the long term. In the next activity, you'll review supporting materials and add confidence level ratings to each of your time estimates. Coming up, we'll discuss effective negotiation techniques to get even more accurate time estimates. Hi. Now that you've added tasks, time estimates, and confidence ratings to your project plan, let's prepare for upcoming negotiations concerning time estimates. PETA has to negotiate with team members about some of the tasks that have low confidence level ratings or that are estimated to take longer than she'd hoped. You'll help by analyzing the supporting materials, recording notes, and identifying some effective negotiation techniques. Earlier, you applied some negotiation skills to discussions about the project scope. Negotiation skills can also help you get accurate time and effort estimates, but the skills you use and the approach you take will be a little different. In this case, you're negotiating with a task expert, not a stakeholder. Your goal is to try to determine an accurate time and effort estimate for a task, instead of persuading them to agree with a certain outcome. You're trying to arrive at an objectively accurate estimate together. On any project, you'll have to work with people who have a tendency to over or underestimate time, costs, or resources. People don't do this intentionally. Usually, they're just being optimistic, or trying to please you by providing what they think you want to hear, rather than what's realistic. Or sometimes, they might be overly cautious and give you an extreme estimate in case something doesn't go according to plan. In some situations, using negotiation skills to get accurate time estimates might be critical to the success of the project. There are lots of different negotiation techniques out there, but let's focus on a few that are specific to negotiating a time estimate. They are say no without saying no, focus on interests, not positions, present mutually beneficial options, and insist on objective criteria. If a task expert gives you a time estimate that's different from what you hoped for, there are a few techniques you can use to try and reach an estimate that works for both of you. Let's start with the first technique, saying no without saying no. The idea behind this technique is to get the other person to start working out an alternative solution with you. Here's how. First, think about the ways we usually tell someone no. That won't work. That's not going to happen. I can't do that, or there's no way. Statements like these can make the person you're communicating with feel defensive and shut down the conversation. Instead, ask open-ended questions like, how would you like me to proceed? How can we solve this problem? And what can I do to help? Questions like these invite the other person to collaborate with you. This keeps the conversation focused on reaching a resolution that works for both of you. Let's explore the next technique. Focus on interests, not positions. Here, the goal is not to win. Instead, try to identify the other person's interests, their basic needs, wants, and motivations around completing a certain task. You might be working with a task expert who cares deeply about completing the task with a high degree of quality. But you're concerned that if you don't meet the deadline, the quality of the work won't matter. You can ask if there are any areas of quality they'd be willing to compromise on that would shorten the schedule estimate, but still allow them to complete the task to an acceptable degree. A third technique is to present mutually beneficial options. We covered this a little already, but here's how you can apply this concept when negotiating time estimates. Imagine both you and your task expert want to complete the task as quickly as possible, but the expert's time estimate is still longer than you'd like. Asking some open-ended questions, like the ones listed earlier, can help you figure out if there's a solution that will satisfy both of your goals. Maybe there's information the expert is missing, or a resource that you could commit to finding and supplying to make the estimate lower. The last technique is to insist on using objective criteria to define a time estimate. Objective criteria is based on neutral information, like market value, research findings, previously documented experience, or laws and regulations. When you use objective criteria, you're basing the agreement on known or shared principles. The key is to agree in advance about which objective criteria to consult, and then to use the information to determine your estimates. You might have an expert who insists on following their instincts when coming up with time estimates. If you ask them in advance to provide clear, objective data that supports their instincts, you can get them to arrive at a more accurate estimate. Okay, let's review what we've covered. There are many scenarios where negotiation skills for a time estimate might be critical to the success of the project. A few techniques that are specific to negotiating a time estimate are: say no without saying no, focus on interests, not positions, present mutually beneficial options, and insist on objective criteria. Great. Now you have a few new negotiation techniques for your project management toolbox. In the next activity, you'll apply what you've learned to time estimate negotiations for the tablet rollout project. Welcome back. Asking for time estimates or questioning why an aspect of the project is delayed can be a difficult conversation. That's why practicing empathy is so important when negotiating and when communicating in general. Empathy is the ability to understand and feel what others are feeling. It's when you make the effort to imagine yourself in the other person's position and experience things from their perspective. Approaching a conversation with empathy can make the discussion much easier. You've learned about how to bring empathy into project management in general, including being present, listening, and asking questions. In this video, we'll discuss how you can bring empathy to conversations about task estimates and timelines. Asking questions about how long a task will take can make some people feel insecure. They might feel like you don't trust them, that you think they're not competent, that you believe you know more than they do about their own work, and so on. Have you ever felt like someone didn't trust you or questioned your ability to complete your work? Even when you're just trying to get a clear understanding of a task you don't understand, asking questions without empathy can leave team members with the sense that you're micromanaging them. Micromanaging is when a manager too closely observes, controls, or continuously reminds the people they're managing of the work they've been assigned. This has a negative impact because it demonstrates the manager's lack of trust and confidence in the people they oversee. There are several ways you can bring empathy to your conversations. One way is to listen with curiosity. Ask questions to demonstrate your interest in what people have to say. Rather than making assumptions or suggestions, start the conversation with a question. For example, you might ask the person how long a particular task took them on a previous project, rather than suggesting a time frame to complete a similar task. Another way to show empathy is to periodically repeat what you think the other person said. Noticing you restate their message in your own words will encourage them to confirm their intent and will ensure you understand what they're communicating. It might also help them view the issues you're discussing from a different perspective. You can also demonstrate empathy by trying to connect with their experience. Let the person know that you understand that making estimations can be difficult for anyone, yourself included. You might share a time on a project when you struggled with making a time estimate for a task, or misestimated it altogether. Make it clear that you know they want to do the best job possible and you want to support them. Practicing empathy also means you're able to recognize your own judgments. Acknowledge to yourself if you're making internal judgments about the person you're communicating with, like if you're having doubts about their work quality, for example. Then find ways to view the situation more compassionately. Even if you don't speak your judgments aloud, people are very good at reading body language and facial expressions and interpreting the tone of others. Try to put yourself in the other person's position and find out about any barriers they might be facing. Another strategy for practicing empathy is recognizing buffering. A team member might add a buffer to their time estimate for a task without communicating why they added the buffer. Ask them upfront if they've included a buffer to account for holidays, sickness, childcare, or emergencies. This can demonstrate your empathy for their situation and can also help you get a more accurate estimate. Encourage them to open up about this extra buffer by assuring them that you want an honest answer, even if it's not ideal. And finally, in order to effectively employ all of these strategies for practicing empathy in your conversations, you need to be able to fully focus on what the other person is communicating. This means avoiding distractions. Putting your phone on silent, not looking at phone notifications or texting, and closing your laptop are some ways to show the person that you're giving them your undivided attention and that what they're sharing is important to you. Let's do a quick review. Empathy is the ability to understand and feel what others are feeling. Some tips for bringing empathy to your conversations are: listen with curiosity, repeat what you think you heard, connect with their experience, recognize judgments, recognize buffering, and avoid distractions. Excellent. Consider these tips for practicing empathy in the upcoming activity. Then I'll meet you in the next video to recap everything we've covered thus far.
Hi, I'm Tori, and I'm an Education Program Manager at Google. Specifically, I work on our digital literacy curriculum called Applied Digital Skills that helps learners of all ages learn the practical digital skills needed for the jobs of today and tomorrow. Empathy can be really important with project management because a lot of times you're dealing with a lot of different potential work styles and communication styles with various members of the team and various stakeholders. So you have to learn how to communicate with those different styles and potentially tailor your messaging to different audiences. It's really important to be able to understand how different people may feel, how they may like to be communicated to, so that you can ensure that you are communicating your project goals and your impact in a very impactful way. So one example where I've had to practice empathy as a program manager is when I was leading a project with about 5 different people on the program team. We were running into some issues with some missed deadlines, actually. I had to end up communicating with one of the project team members just to try to understand what was going on, why were some of the deadlines being missed. Ultimately, we discovered that there were some things personally that were going on that we ultimately ended up having to reshift some of our resources and get help from other teammates. So that's an example of just trying to meet people where they are, understand that there's lots of things outside of work that are also going on. And sometimes you can adjust your timelines and your deadlines as needed or get help from other team members along the way. So when you are negotiating task estimates, I think a really good thing to do right from the beginning is just ask a lot of questions. Just talk to different people on the team. Maybe you're even new to the team and you want to get some different experience and folks who've been on the team a little longer. And just try to figure out if there are any examples of past projects that are similar to the one that you're leading. Try to see if there are other projects that may be a little different but have a different timeline. I think that can really help in the beginning. Just ask a lot of questions and collect as much data and information as you can from the beginning.
Great job making it to the end of this section. In this last series of activities, you transitioned from the initiation phase of the project lifecycle to the planning phase, putting your knowledge and skills to work on a project plan. You analyzed project documentation to improve your domain knowledge and identify project tasks. And you uncovered more tasks by conducting online research and analyzing key communications with the project team and task experts. Then, you determined accurate time estimates for each task by knowing which questions to ask and practicing effective negotiation techniques. You added confidence level ratings to your estimates by using the 3-point estimating method, and you learned how to demonstrate empathy in your conversations about task estimates. The project plan you've built for Sauce and Spoon will be an important part of your project management portfolio. It demonstrates your ability to break a large project into a set of achievable, smaller tasks. You can also use your project plan during an interview to discuss how you approach project management work. Up next, we'll get ready to move into the execution stage of the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout project by creating a quality management plan. Talk to you soon. Welcome back. So far, you've completed a project charter and a project plan for the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout project. Coming up, we'll move from the planning phase of the project lifecycle to the execution phase. But before you can begin executing, you'll need to make sure your project's quality management plan has been established so you know you're delivering a project that meets your stakeholders' expectations. In the upcoming videos and activities, you'll practice defining quality standards for your project. Then, you'll evaluate how successfully the project standards are being met and present your findings to stakeholders. You'll also create a retrospective document, which project managers use during discussions about project progress and any process improvements that need to be made. Before we get started, let's review the project scenario for this course. Sauce and Spoon is a small but growing chain of restaurants with 5 locations. They've hired PETA as their first in-house project manager to launch the pilot of tablet menus at 2 of their locations. Over the next several videos, I'll share helpful information you can use to complete each activity and assessment, and I'll offer tips that you can take with you after you complete this course. By the time we're done, you'll understand how to establish a list of quality standards for one aspect of the Sauce and Spoon project. You'll also practice writing evaluation questions and survey questions that'll help you determine if the quality standards are being met. And finally, you'll learn how to improve the process along the way and create a retrospective document, which you'll be able to add to your portfolio of project management documents. Ready to get started? Meet me in the next video where we'll get started on developing your quality management plan. Hi again. In this video, I'll review key quality management concepts and discuss in more detail the importance and purpose of maintaining project quality. A crucial part of project planning and executing includes implementing a quality management plan and holding yourself to it throughout the project. Quality planning refers to the process that the project manager or the team establishes and follows for identifying and determining exactly which standards of quality are relevant to the project as a whole and how to satisfy them. We can't just launch a project and assume everything will be okay. That's why planning for quality, with clearly defined standards, processes, and methods of evaluation, is important. It helps keep you focused on whether or not the project is progressing successfully and alerts you to any adjustments that need to be made to keep the project on track. Remember, as a project manager, you're responsible for the planning and execution of the project, as well as for the successful completion of the project. Quality planning works together with general project planning and aligns with the overall project process, project goals, and success criteria. For the Sauce and Spoon tablet project, we'll focus the details of a quality management plan on quality standards, evaluation questions, and feedback surveys to ensure that the project is delivering on quality and producing a desired outcome. After this video, you'll practice project quality management by identifying quality standards for the Sauce and Spoon tablet pilot. Let's get started. There are many benefits of creating and maintaining quality management in a project. Some of these benefits include delivering a quality product, decreasing overhead, and increasing collaboration and ongoing reviews. Overhead is another word for costs. Quality management helps decrease overhead by reducing the amount of errors that would cost the organization money to fix. Quality management processes ensure that the team is always learning and providing feedback, which in turn ensures that the project is on track to achieve its intended outcome. In earlier courses, we covered the main concepts of quality management. I'll do a quick review here. The main concepts are quality planning, which I defined at the beginning of this video, quality standards, which are the requirements, specifications, or guidelines that can be used to ensure the materials, products, processes, and services are fit for achieving a desired outcome, quality assurance, or QA, which is a review process that evaluates whether your project is moving towards delivering a high-quality service or product, and quality control, often known as QC. Quality control refers to the techniques that are used to ensure quality standards are maintained when a problem is identified. Here, we'll focus on building quality standards for the Sauce and Spoon project, but in many projects, all of these concepts get built into an overarching quality management plan, which documents all the information needed to effectively manage quality throughout the project lifecycle. The quality management plan defines the policies, processes, and criteria for project quality, as well as the roles and responsibilities for carrying them out. Again, there are lots of different ways to develop and track quality management for your project, but the benefits and main concepts that make up quality management remain the same. Let's review. Some of the benefits of quality management include delivering a quality product, decreasing overhead, and increasing collaboration and review. And the main concepts of quality management are quality planning, quality standards, quality assurance or QA, and quality control or QC. Understanding these benefits and concepts will help you ensure you deliver a project that meets your stakeholders' expectations. Coming up, you'll apply your understanding of quality management to develop quality standards for the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout. Meet me in the next video to learn how. Hi there. Now that we've reviewed the benefits and main concepts of quality management, we'll explore what it means to define quality standards. We'll also discuss how to evaluate those standards to ensure you're meeting the project's goals. Before we get into discussing quality standards, let's define what we mean by project quality. Quality means making sure that you deliver what you say you will, and that you do so as efficiently as you can. Getting a project done on time and under budget doesn't necessarily mean you've met your goals. You need to be sure you've delivered a project that meets your stakeholders' needs. That's why project quality is tracked throughout the life cycle of the project. You can measure project quality by defining quality standards for the various aspects of the project, like major tasks, milestones, and deliverables. Quality standards are the requirements and specifications that your product or service must meet in order to be considered successful by your organization and the customer. Establishing standards helps you identify ways of testing and evaluating the project's quality throughout the planning and execution phases and after the project is launched. If the quality of different aspects of a project is failing to meet the agreed upon standards, you then have the opportunity to adjust your project plan to meet those standards. Let's use an example from the Sauce and Spoon project. One of the deliverables is training of management, front of house staff, and back of house staff. How will you know if that deliverable has been fulfilled successfully? What are the expectations or standards your stakeholders have for meeting this requirement? For this deliverable, think about what the staff needs to be able to do or demonstrate at the end of the training. Does each staff group need to be trained on the same things? Will management have different training requirements from front of house and back of house staff? And does the training need to fit within a specific time frame, budget, or geographic location to be considered successful? Your answers to questions like these will be the start of your list of quality standards for this deliverable. There are lots of resources that can help you determine the standards for your project, and standards will look different depending on the type of project. The first resources to consult are project documents like the business case and project charter. These documents state the goals, scope, budget, and other details that can clarify the different requirements of the project so it's acceptable to your stakeholders. Just like you did when you identified tasks and time estimates, if you need more information to help you determine quality standards, you can have conversations with experts and stakeholders, and you can do some industry research. For example, if you need to know how long it takes the tablets to recharge, ask the vendor who will be training the staff or the tablet sales representative. It's also a good idea to have conversations with the stakeholders who are funding the project to understand their perspective on how long they expect the tablets to last before needing to be replaced. Do industry research on the internet to see if there are established quality standards for the type of project that you're working on. For example, software and construction industries have established quality standards related to functionality, design, and safety. Other categories of established quality standards that you'll find in many industries include ease of use, productivity, effectiveness, and customer satisfaction. It's important that your standards are objective and measurable so you can clearly identify that the standard has been met. As you have conversations and conduct your research, you might notice stakeholders referring to a general category, like ease of use, without providing specifics. As the project manager, you should aim to get specific details by asking, what would be a sign that the tablets are easy to use or hard to use? You might get a response like, it shouldn't take longer than 20 seconds to place an order, or returning customers report that it's faster to use the tablet versus placing an order with a server. Now you have objective, measurable standards. Let's consider a few questions to ask yourself when considering various standards. If standards are related to productivity and effectiveness, you might want to ask questions like, should the existence of the tablets change anything about how the front of house staff works? Does it make them faster or allow them to serve more tables at one time? If standards are related to customer satisfaction, you could ask questions like, how would the tablets ideally impact the customer's experience? What would you want the customer to do or say as a result of using the tablets? By asking yourself or your task experts these kinds of questions, you can narrow down the standard that you're aiming to make objective and measurable. All of these resources, such as project documents, conversations with experts, and industry research, can help you determine the quality standards for different aspects of your project. But remember, you'll still need to use your critical thinking skills to determine the right standards and adjust them if necessary to meet the specific needs of your project. Let's review what we've discussed so far. Quality means making sure that you deliver what you say you will and that you do so as efficiently as you can. Quality standards are the requirements and specifications that your product or service must meet in order to be considered successful by your organization and the customer. There are lots of resources that can help you determine the standards for your project, including project documents, like the business case and charter, conversations with experts and stakeholders, and industry research. Some common categories of established quality standards from various industries include functionality, design, safety, ease of use, productivity, and effectiveness. And finally, it's important that your standards are objective and measurable, so you can clearly identify that the standard has been met. Coming up, you'll use your critical thinking skills to determine quality standards for one part of the Sauce and Spoon tablet project. Then, you'll learn how to evaluate against your standards to ensure that your project is achieving the required level of quality. Meet you there. Hi again. In the last video, we reviewed the main concepts of quality management and defining quality standards for a project. Then, after analyzing project documentation and a conversation between PETA and stakeholders, you helped solidify a list of quality standards for one of Sauce and Spoon's project deliverables. Once the quality management plan is underway with clearly defined quality standards, you're ready to measure against your standards and can finally begin implementing the project. Since the last activity, PETA and her team have begun implementing the tablet rollout. Both of the restaurants that were selected for the pilot have had tables outfitted with tablets. The staff has been trained, and guests have been placing their orders using the new tablets. In this video, we'll discuss the importance of evaluation as it relates to the project's quality management plan, specifically quality assurance. Remember, quality assurance consists of reviewing processes to evaluate whether or not your project is delivering an acceptable level of quality. And evaluation involves observing, measuring, and then comparing your findings to a set of agreed-upon criteria. This could be your quality standards or the overall goals of your project. Coming up, you'll create evaluation questions as part of the QA process so that you can measure how well your project is meeting the established quality standards. Understanding how to create strong evaluation questions will give you the tools and skills you need to measure the success of your project throughout the project lifecycle. Let's get started. In the same way that quality management plans may look different for each project, quality assurance can be implemented in a variety of ways. Some examples of quality assurance are beta testing, internal checklists, and feedback surveys. Each of these methods allow you to evaluate and measure how well your project is meeting its goals. Evaluation is a form of research designed to promote learning and informed decisions. It also provides accountability and helps you assess to what extent the project has achieved its objectives. When you use evaluation, you're able to improve upon, judge, and learn about different aspects of the project and the project itself. For example, with the Sauce and Spoon project, evaluation can help you improve how to implement the staff training process more efficiently. It might help you judge or assess whether something is working the way it was intended, or whether you should continue in the same direction. It could be that the staff had a hard time learning how to use the tablets because the touchscreens kept malfunctioning, in which case you need to assess whether or not to continue with the original launch date. You also need to make sure that the project is not creating any unintended problems, either for the organization, your team, or anyone else impacted by the project's existence. For example, you'll need to assess when the best time for tablet installation is. If you schedule tablet installation when the restaurant is open, that might create a negative dining experience for restaurant guests. By reflecting on areas of improvement and judging how certain aspects of the project performed, you learn what things made the project run as intended, how it can be replicated, and how challenges can be overcome in the future. Your evaluation may have a single focus, like identifying what needs to be improved or judging whether a project or process should continue in its current format. Regardless of your goals, your evaluation will ultimately allow you to assess all three of these areas of improvement and lead you to a better understanding of the overall success of the project, as well as its impact on and benefit to the organization. Okay, so now that we know why evaluation is used in project management, let's get into the evaluation process so that you know how to carry out an evaluation and get the information you need. In order to identify what you really want to know about your project, first articulate why you're evaluating. Understanding your why will shape the types of questions you ask about your project. This goes back to improving, judging, and learning. Even though all three of these will be addressed to some degree, certain aspects will have a more specific focus for evaluation. You can narrow down what to focus on by reviewing both the project goals and organizational goals and determining how the aspect you're evaluating connects to one of these goals. Let's discuss an example. The Sauce and Spoon project has just reached one of its last milestones, the completion of 3 key deliverables that are required for project launch testing. Those deliverables are installing the tablets, integrating the tablets with the POS system, and training the staff to use the tablets. In an upcoming meeting with stakeholders, PETA will need to provide an update on the project's progress and share an evaluation of this milestone. It's important for PETA to share this evaluation since it will inform stakeholders on future phases of the project and beyond, including a tablet rollout at 2 more restaurant locations. So PETA's why is judging the quality and performance of the tablets and identifying ways to improve the training process. Once you've decided what your reasons for evaluating are, you're ready to write out your evaluation questions. An evaluation question is a key question about the outcomes, impact, and/or effectiveness of your project or program. There are 2 main categories of evaluation questions: questions that ask how you can make improvements, and questions that help you measure and compare. Questions that help you improve sound like this: how can we improve? What is working and what's not working? Which goals are being met? Who is benefiting? What are the most common participant reactions? Next, we have questions that measure and compare. These questions will help you make judgments about how or whether to proceed with a process or with the project itself. Questions for measuring and comparing sound like this: what were the results? Were there unintended outcomes? What were the costs and benefits? Are there any lessons to be learned? Should we continue? So if we think back to the Sauce and Spoon project, one of the evaluation questions might be, to what extent do tablets improve the staff's work performance? If you keep in mind the overall goals of the project, you'll be able to write effective questions that generate the type of data you want. Effective evaluation questions meet the following criteria. They address stakeholder or user values, interests, and concerns. They relate to the purpose of the project and of evaluation. They're worth answering and are important for the project and beyond, and they're practical and feasible to answer with available resources. Amazing job. Let's review some of what we've learned so far. Evaluation is a form of research designed to promote learning and inform decisions. It also provides accountability. An evaluation question is a key question about the outcomes, impact, and/or effectiveness of your project, or a key aspect of your project. And there are 2 main categories of evaluation questions: those that ask how to make improvements, and those that help you measure and compare. In the next video, I'll discuss how to create evaluation indicators for your questions, which will help you focus the type of feedback that will be most useful to your project. You'll apply what you've learned in upcoming activities as you review the supporting materials and write your own set of evaluation questions and indicators. Meet you there. Welcome back. In the last video, we discussed the importance of evaluation and how to come up with effective evaluation questions that address certain aspects and outcomes of your project. In this video, I'll discuss how to determine evaluation indicators. Evaluation indicators reveal the specific type of data that needs to be collected to help you answer your evaluation questions. In the next activity, you'll identify evaluation indicators for each of your evaluation questions and add them to the Sauce and Spoon Quality Management Plan. Simply put, indicators state what you want to measure or evaluate, like the number of something, level of satisfaction, preferences, or demographic information such as age, gender, experience, and so on. Similar to the way quality standards add specificity to your deliverables and goals, evaluation indicators take your evaluation question and determine the specific type of response you're aiming for. You'll need this information to understand whether or not your project or process meets the quality standards that were agreed upon in the project plan. Let's return to the Sauce and Spoon project and the evaluation question, which asks, to what extent do tablets improve the staff's work performance? To evaluate this, you'll have to ask yourself, how are you going to measure work performance? You'll have to decide on indicators of work performance, like faster table turnover rates, higher tip averages, or higher quality rating from customers. Another way to think of indicators is that they provide pathways for answering your evaluation questions. Indicators demonstrate that the outcomes are achieved and provide measurable evidence of meeting a goal. They also include visible signs like test scores, attendance rates, or observed behavior. The word indicate means point out or show. Evaluation indicators point out or show the way to answer the evaluation question. This could include visible signs of how the staff works with the new tablets. Observed behavior, such as fewer staff members congregating by the beverage station or arriving late to work, could be an indicator of increased productivity. Or, over 90% staff compliance with the tablet ordering process could be an indicator of order placement accuracy. Awesome. Let's review. Evaluation indicators determine what data needs to be collected that will help you answer your evaluation questions. This includes clues, signs, or markers that measure one aspect of a project and demonstrate how close that aspect is to meeting the quality standards that have been established. In the next activity, you'll add evaluation indicators for each of the evaluation questions you added to the Sauce and Spoon quality management plan. When you're done, meet me in the next video to get started on developing survey questions. Welcome back. By now, you should have created a list of evaluation questions related to your quality standards for the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout project and added evaluation indicators for each question. In this video, we'll discuss the survey development process, and I'll explain how a survey question is different from an evaluation question. Surveys are one of the tools that project managers use to get answers for their evaluation questions. There are lots of methods for collecting data, and surveys are a popular method in project management. In a survey, each respondent answers a set of clearly defined questions, and the data are collected and analyzed. This data can be used to demonstrate specific examples of the evaluation indicators you identified for your project. For the tablet rollout, PETA has decided to create customer surveys as a way to get answers to the project's evaluation questions. So, in an upcoming activity, you'll write a set of survey questions and add them to your quality management plan. Being able to develop a survey and write survey questions is important because it demonstrates your ability to understand the goals of your project and assess how your stakeholders and users value the project. This helps you determine if you're achieving your quality goals and where you need to make adjustments. Let's start with a brief review of surveys. Surveys are tools you can use to evaluate and measure the quality of a project's process, goal, or deliverable. Making surveys a part of your quality management plan is one way to help you understand what's working and what's not working. Surveys assess the criteria you want to evaluate and provide you with data that will point out whether you've met your quality standards. Designing an effective survey that will deliver the data you want is a skill and follows a strategic development process. First, you'll need to develop evaluation questions and define your evaluation indicators, which you've already done. Then, you can determine what type of survey to design and questions to ask that will give you the data you need to answer your evaluation questions. Since you've already come up with your evaluation questions and indicators, the next step is to determine what types of survey questions you're going to ask. As a reminder, a survey question is different from an evaluation question. An evaluation question is a key question about the outcomes, impact, and/or effectiveness of your project or program. Whereas a survey question is designed to collect data which can help you answer your evaluation questions. In other words, survey questions are a more direct interpretation of your evaluation questions designed to get data points. Let's consider a specific example, the Sauce and Spoon evaluation question that asks, to what extent do tablets increase work performance? One of the indicators of work performance is how much side work the staff are able to complete during a shift. Some corresponding survey questions might be, are the tablets easy to use? Was there enough time during the training to practice and ask questions? On average, how many of your side work tasks are you able to complete during a shift? Since using the tablets, how often have you sent back an incorrect order? The answers to these questions will give you data to track and answer your evaluation questions. So, how do you write effective survey questions that will address what you're trying to evaluate? There are two different types of survey questions you can ask: open-ended and closed-ended questions. Open-ended questions require more than one-word answers, such as yes or no. They ask respondents to answer in their own words. For example, what went well during the presentation? Or, what did you find most useful or interesting about the presentation? The point is that the respondent has to construct their own answer to the question rather than selecting from a list of predetermined answer choices. Closed-ended questions can be answered with a single response, like yes or no, or true or false, or selecting a single answer from a list. Let's examine three types of closed-ended questions in more detail. The first type of closed-ended question asks for yes/no or true/false type answers. These are questions like, did you order an appetizer? And have you eaten at this restaurant before? The second type of closed-ended question is multiple choice. Multiple choice questions have, you guessed it, multiple answer choices. You're usually instructed to select one of the answer options or to select all that apply. The question could be something like, how often do you dine at this location each month? And then a range of answer options like 0 to 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 5, and 5 or more. A third kind of closed-ended question is a scaled question. Scaled questions provide more than two options, but they're different from multiple choice because they ask the respondent to rate their answers on a scale. For example, how often something occurs, how much they like or dislike something, or how important they think something is. A sample scaled question might be, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you rate your overall dining experience, with 1 being poor and 5 being excellent? Regardless of the question type, creating good survey questions is a skill that takes a bit of practice. Here are some tips. First and foremost, make sure your questions are asking what you mean to ask. Each question should be specific and address only one measurable aspect. Be careful not to make assumptions about your respondents. For example, don't assume that everyone taking your survey knows or enjoys the same things or has similar life experiences. Ask questions and provide answer options that allow people to answer accurately about their experience. At the same time, you want to make sure that your questions don't provide too much detail or information. If you do, you might end up influencing the respondent to answer in a certain way, which could unintentionally create bias. Wow, that was a lot of information. Let's review so it's fresh in our minds. Survey data helps you determine if you're achieving your quality goals and where you need to make adjustments. Surveys can also help you understand what's working and what's not working, help you assess the criteria you want to evaluate, and provide data that will point out whether you've met your quality standards. The survey development process includes developing evaluation questions, defining your evaluation indicators, and determining what type of survey to design and questions to ask. In the next activity, you'll review your quality management plan and create survey questions for one of Sauce and Spoon's evaluation questions. Then, I'll meet you in the next video to discuss how to present the data that gets collected from your survey. Hey there, welcome back. In the last video, we discussed the value of feedback surveys and how to create effective survey questions. Then, you had the chance to write some questions for one of Sauce and Spoon's user feedback surveys. Since the last video, the Sauce and Spoon surveys have been administered and the data has been collected. This data is the result of your evaluation, so now it's time to analyze the data and report your findings on how well the project is measuring up to its quality standards. In this video, we'll cover tips and best practices for determining your audience, choosing the style of your evaluation report, and delivering an effective presentation. We'll also discuss how to distinguish between reviewing data and presenting an evaluation. Then, in the next activity, you'll apply what you've learned to analyze survey data and create presentation slides for an upcoming stakeholder meeting. You'll be able to add these slides to your project management portfolio to demonstrate your ability to synthesize and summarize data into recommendations for a particular audience. There are different ways to present an evaluation, and you'll need to decide which style is best for your project and audience. Start out by considering your audience. Think about what's most meaningful to them, as well as how much time they have. If your audience is a mix of roles or groups, like team members, managers, stakeholders, and executives, consider the best way to share information with each group. In some cases, you'll need to present the same data in different ways. Different audiences have different reasons for wanting information. Your team, for example, could benefit from a detailed report so they can address aspects of the project they're responsible for. However, groups like senior stakeholders and executives typically do not need, want, or have the time for a detailed analysis. They would rather have a summary of the most important information and the impact it has on their investment in the project. After you've considered your audience, you should create a detailed evaluation report that addresses your evaluation questions. You can then take the detailed report and summarize the information into the most appropriate format for a given audience. In addition to a full report, two common reporting styles include a summary sheet and a slide-based presentation. A summary sheet is a 1 or 2 page write-up with just the most relevant information. Think of it as a flyer or snapshot of your findings. And a slide-based presentation uses digital slides to visually present information. Presenting evaluation findings should not just be a raw data report. Your presentation needs to reflect what the data means and explain how it informs a response to the evaluation questions. In order to do this, you need to filter and analyze the data. This is probably the most important part, because this is where you make sense of the data for yourself. By filtering and analyzing, you become familiar with the results, the respondents, and what those results mean in regards to project quality. Here's the difference between reporting data and presenting evaluation findings. Let's say the survey data reveals that 36% of respondents reported a negative dining experience with the tablets. But what does that data mean? It could mean several things. It could mean that the tablets weren't installed correctly, resulting in performance glitches. It could mean the tablets are poor quality, so even if they were installed correctly, the tablets just didn't function very well. It could mean the staff wasn't trained well enough, resulting in delayed or incorrect orders. Or it could mean that respondents simply didn't like using the tablets and prefer a standard dining experience. You see, data alone isn't enough. You need to conduct additional analysis that explains the data. Your job is to figure out what the data means and explain how the data answers your evaluation questions. When you can explain what the data means in your own words, you'll have the basis for your presentation. A good way to start analyzing data to present is to look for trends, patterns, and anomalies. Another tip is to share this process with some of your team members. Taking turns sharing what you think the data means allows you to check your understanding and uncover additional information through your varied perspectives. After you've analyzed your data and know how you'd like to present it, shape the story of your findings by tying it all together into one cohesive narrative. Take some time to think about what you're hoping to achieve, the points you want to make, and the questions and concerns you want to answer. A great way to present an evaluation is through a story. Storytelling is the process of turning facts into narrative to communicate something to your audience. This is essentially what you do when you present your evaluation findings. You tell the story of your data. We provide some great tips and more details of the storytelling process in those earlier courses, so check them out if you need more help. For the tablet project, the point of the presentation is to demonstrate to stakeholders whether or not the project is successfully meeting quality standards. So you might start by reminding them of the overall goal and purpose of the project. From there, identify the milestone that's being evaluated and how it's expected to meet the project goals. Explain what the data revealed, but don't cover every single data point or survey question. Again, you're telling a story about the data, not presenting the raw data itself. Identify any major issues the data revealed and summarize the rest. If the data reveals that things are going well, pick a few highlights and move on. If there are some major failings, suggest possible solutions or craft specific questions you need answers to. Let's review. There are different ways to present an evaluation. You need to decide which style is best for your audience. To do this, consider what's most meaningful to them and how much time they have. In some cases, you'll need to present the same data in different ways. Common reporting styles, in addition to a full detailed report, are a summary sheet and a slide-based presentation. An evaluation is not simply a raw data report. It needs to reflect what the data means and explain how it informs a response to the evaluation questions. In order to do this, you'll need to filter and analyze the data. A great way to present an evaluation is through a story. Storytelling is the process of turning facts into narrative to communicate something to your audience. In the next activity, you'll review data results from the Sauce and Spoon feedback surveys and craft presentation slides that tell the story of your evaluation. Then you'll wrap up the section with a retrospective. See you soon. Welcome back. In the last video, you practiced your presentation skills by synthesizing data into evaluation findings and communicating those findings by creating slides to be shared with key stakeholders. In this video, we'll briefly review retrospectives and their value to a project team. Retrospectives are an example of quality control because they help teams adjust and improve processes as needed. Coming up, you'll learn from PETA as she facilitates a retrospective. You'll break down the conversations and extract the details you'll need to build into the retrospective document. Let's start with a refresher on retrospectives. A retrospective, sometimes referred to as a retro, is a workshop or meeting that gives project teams time to reflect on a project. A retrospective gives you a chance to discuss project successes and setbacks and to learn from mistakes. Though retrospectives often happen at the very end of a project, they are also a helpful process improvement tool that can and should be used throughout the project lifecycle, especially after reaching a project milestone. For example, right after implementing the tablets and testing them with beta users is a great time for a Sauce and Spoon retrospective. You could celebrate parts of the project that have gone well so far and identify opportunities for improvement as the project moves toward upcoming milestones. Retrospectives have lots of benefits. They encourage team building by providing team members with the opportunity to understand different perspectives within the team. They also facilitate improved collaboration on future projects. And they promote positive changes in future procedures and processes. Because a retrospective is a specific type of meeting, it's crucial to have an agenda to help guide the discussion, organize the meeting, and document learnings. As the project manager, you need to manage the tone of the conversation, make sure that every team member feels included, and identify details that'll be recorded in the retrospective document for future reference. In other words, it's your role to facilitate a respectful and productive retrospective discussion that recognizes successes and areas for improvement. Let's recap the main ideas. A retrospective is a workshop or meeting that gives project teams time to reflect on a project. Three main purposes of retrospectives are to encourage team building, facilitate improved collaboration, and promote positive changes. And remember, it's your role as project manager to facilitate a respectful and productive retrospective discussion that recognizes successes and areas for improvement. In this next activity, you'll practice preparing for a retrospective by creating a list that includes successes and areas for improvement. Once you're done with this video, you'll observe how PETA interacts with her team members as she conducts the retrospective and add information to your document. See you soon. Hey again, in the last video, we reviewed the importance of retrospectives. Now it's time to figure out how to deal with the sometimes tricky aspects of retrospectives. In this video, I'll take you through effective techniques you can use to address a lack of participation during a retrospective. Low participation can prevent a project team from making meaningful process improvements. But if you've got methods you can rely on to help boost participation, you'll be more prepared to lead any kind of retrospective throughout your career in project management. After this video, you'll review supporting materials that will demonstrate how PETA handles lack of participation in a retrospective. You'll be able to identify and add several new details to your retrospective document. First, let's just say it. Retrospectives can be a bit intimidating. When you host a retrospective with your team, you draw attention not only to project successes, but also to challenges. If a team feels uncomfortable voicing challenges, then they might not be very eager to participate during a retrospective discussion. So, before jumping into any retrospective, make sure to ask yourself, does your team seem likely to contribute to the discussion? If you feel like the answer might be no, follow along as we discuss a few useful techniques we use at Google to encourage participation in a retrospective. One technique I use frequently to encourage participation is to create a safe environment for the team. To create a safe environment, you might open the meeting by adopting a policy of what's said here stays here, what's learned here leaves. Remind the team that the retrospective is a meeting free from stakeholders or customers, and that it's a safe space where the team can speak directly about problems. To help increase participation, it can also be helpful to model the kind of participation you'd like to elicit from your team. So if you're trying to help your team feel comfortable speaking candidly about project successes and challenges, you could set the tone by starting the discussion with your own successes and challenges. Before the meeting, try preparing a few examples of tasks or processes you know you could have handled better. If you know that you made a mistake on a project task, say it out loud. For example, maybe you made a paperwork error that slowed down tablet delivery by 2 business days. Be honest about your mistake and talk about how you'll avoid similar errors going forward. When you admit to your own mistakes, you make it okay for the rest of your team to share their mistakes too. Another useful technique to encourage participation is to pose a group question and ask for individual responses. For example, you could ask your team members to each think of one success and one challenge from the project so far. Then ask each team member to share their responses. If you find that a question you've asked doesn't get the kind of response you'd hoped for, try phrasing it in a different way. For example, if questions like, what went well and what went wrong, don't get you the responses you'd like, try alternatives. Maybe ask something like, what about this project should we start, stop, and continue? And finally, if your team is participating but contributing only very recent successes and challenges, it may be helpful to review the project timeline. This is a technique for encouraging teammates to think further back in the project lifecycle to identify successes and challenges. If you remind your team of the project timeline, you can refresh their memories and spark more discussion about the entire project. Let's do a quick recap. Low participation during a retrospective can prevent a project team from making meaningful process improvements. Some effective techniques to encourage participation include: establish a safe environment for the team, model the kind of participation you'd like to elicit from your team, pose a group question and ask for individual responses, and review the project timeline. In the upcoming activity, as you review the supporting materials, you'll get a look at how PETA handles lack of participation in a retrospective, and you'll add some content to your accompanying retrospective document. After you've finished the activity, meet me in the next video to discuss techniques for encouraging accountability. Bye for now. In the last video, we explored ways you can address a lack of participation during a retrospective. In this video, I'll share some techniques for encouraging accountability during a retrospective. Accountability refers to being responsible for decisions associated with a project or task. Accountability is a really important part of a productive retrospective. If a retrospective is meant to serve as a helpful tool for process improvement, then participants in the retrospective need to be honest about how the team could have performed better. Only then can the team figure out how to improve in the future. Knowing how to push a team to take accountability for a given project will be a huge benefit to you in your career. After this video, you'll review supporting materials that demonstrate how PETA handles individual and team accountability in a retrospective. Then you'll identify and add new details to your retrospective document. Before we move on, I want to make one point clear. Accountability and blame are two very different things, and only accountability belongs in a retrospective. Blame shuts people down instead of empowering them to share honestly. Accountability doesn't involve assigning blame to specific team members for mistakes. Instead, it encourages the team to think holistically about mistakes and challenges and identifies solutions for the future. Another benefit of accountability is that it encourages ownership. When a team member feels ownership over an aspect of the project, they may be more motivated throughout the project to ensure that aspect meets quality standards and helps the project progress towards the goal. So let's discuss some great techniques you can use to encourage accountability during a retrospective. One technique I like to use is to come prepared with specific challenges to discuss as a group. This can be especially helpful if you find that your team wants to focus discussion only on project successes. To encourage accountability, call attention to a specific challenge. Maybe the Sauce and Spoon kitchen managers provided feedback that they felt left out of decisions made by the general managers. During a retrospective, you might share this feedback with the group and ask the team to help figure out problems that led to this feedback. Another useful technique is to turn team complaints into smart action items. You've learned that project goals should be SMART, which means that they're specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. But here's another tip. Action items can be SMART too. If you find that your team does more complaining than problem solving, pick a complaint and turn it into a SMART action item. For example, let's go back to our example where the kitchen managers feel out of the loop on general decision making. As a project manager, it might be a good idea to add an action item to invite the kitchen manager to the weekly staff check-in meetings. If you want to take it one step further, you can even add a 5-minute agenda item for the kitchen manager to discuss issues and get feedback. Then, you can make a plan to check in 2 months to find out if they're still feeling this way, or if they feel more included. By showing your team how to turn complaints into action, you can help your team become more solution-oriented. When it comes to encouraging accountability, it's also a good idea to push the team to identify its role in creating a given challenge. Your team might seem inclined to focus only on challenges they feel they had no control or influence over, like a late delivery from your tablet supplier, for example. When discussing challenges that the team seems reluctant to take responsibility for, you can help your team think about the series of events that led to a given challenge. Then, you might push your team to identify a moment in that series of events when they missed an opportunity to recognize and address the problem. Let's go back to the tablet supplier delivery issue. Maybe if someone on the team had been assigned the responsibility of managing the tablet supplier vendor early on in the project, they might have set up weekly check-in calls with the vendor. This could have given the restaurants the foresight to plan for and work around the missed delivery. When you help your team identify its own role in creating challenges, you encourage reflection that might lead to helpful insights and ideas for process improvements. As your team talks about various challenges they faced, make sure criticism remains constructive. Constructive criticism is a respectful form of feedback that is intended to help the recipient improve a piece of work. If criticism of a portion of the project begins to go from constructive to unhelpful or harsh, it'll be your role as the project manager to redirect the conversation. To change the subject, try to detach the challenge being discussed from any specific person in the room. You can do this by steering the conversation toward process improvements that the entire team can learn from. Let's review the main ideas. Accountability and blame are two very different things, and only accountability belongs in a retrospective. Accountability refers to being responsible for decisions associated with a project or task. Accountability is about encouraging the team to think holistically about mistakes and challenges, and encouraging ownership. Some techniques you can use to encourage accountability during a retrospective include: come prepared with specific challenges to discuss as a group, turn team complaints into SMART action items, push the team to identify its role in creating a given challenge, and detach the challenge being discussed from any specific person in the room. In the upcoming activity, you'll observe as PETA encourages accountability during retrospectives, and you'll keep building out your retrospective document. After you've completed the upcoming activity, meet me in the next video to discuss techniques for addressing negativity in a retrospective. Welcome back. In the last video, we discussed some ways you can encourage accountability in a retrospective. In this video, you'll learn how to address negativity in a retrospective. Thoughtfully handling negativity is an important skill you'll need in order to effectively lead productive discussions in the future. The ability to guide discussions that break down project performance while maintaining a constructive and positive tone will help you identify and improve problem areas of a specific project. After this video, you'll observe PETA carefully handle negativity as she leads a retrospective. Then, you'll apply similar techniques as you wrap up your own retrospective document. Before you do your own retrospective, it's important to ask yourself, is this conversation likely to feel stressful for the team? Sometimes the answer will be yes. Let's talk about why negativity sometimes comes up during retrospective discussions. Retrospectives are a great way to build trust, honesty, and direct communication with the team. But keep in mind, if the environment doesn't feel psychologically safe to the team, it's very easy for a retrospective to turn negative. Negativity can make it more difficult to hold a productive discussion that identifies solutions to project challenges. If you sense subtle or even obvious negativity during a retrospective discussion, here are some techniques you can use to change the tone of the meeting and guide the team toward a more positive outlook. To address team negativity, aim to set a positive tone at the start of the meeting. Kick off by highlighting project successes. Maybe the team received positive feedback from a stakeholder. Or you could thank the team for their hard work in reaching a major milestone. Determine how you'll set the tone of the meeting. Meeting props can help with this. For example, you might hand out an even number of green and red index cards to each participant and ask attendees to write successes on the green cards and challenges on the red cards. Passing out green cards might subtly encourage the team to think of successes in addition to challenges. Even on teams with a generally positive overall dynamic, it's always possible for negativity to come up. So it might be a good idea to try anticipating any potential negativity by meeting one-on-one with team members before the retrospective happens. If you get the feeling that one team member is likely to bring a negative attitude to the retrospective, try asking yourself a few questions. Does this person feel insecure about the value they add to this team? Does this person receive negative feedback on the quality of their work? Understanding the root of the negativity can help you figure out how to help the person engage with the group in a more positive way. For example, if you sense the person is feeling insecure, you could try reassuring them of their value. A single negative voice can derail otherwise productive discussions. As the retrospective leader, it's your role to step in when one person's negativity dominates the conversation. To deal with negative participation from an individual team member, consider asking team members individually to share their thoughts. Calling on team members individually does a few things. It gives each person room to share challenges. It helps them model solution-oriented thinking for their negative team member, and it discourages the negative team member from dominating the conversation by responding to every question. Finally, you might call a meeting break. A timeout is a great way to help de-escalate the situation. It's good to remember that there's no single technique that fits every scenario. How you choose to address negativity will depend on the situation. Let's review. To address negativity during a retrospective, you can aim to set a positive tone at the start of the meeting, determine how you'll set the tone of the meeting, consider asking individual team members to share their thoughts rather than posing questions to the group, or call a meeting break. In the upcoming activity, you'll observe PETA by reviewing the supporting materials as she navigates negative situations in the Sauce and Spoon team's retrospective. Then, you'll finish your version of the retrospective. After you've completed the upcoming activity, meet me in the next video to wrap up.
Hi, my name is Dana, and I'm a Site Reliability Manager at Google. A retrospective is a process that we go through at the end of every project, where it helps us to look back and learn about the things that went well, the things that went poorly, and where we got lucky. It's a way for us to see if we can take the lessons that we have learned from a project and then reuse them in the next project. Most commonly, we do retrospectives at the end of projects, but then sometimes if we're at the middle of the project and we find ourselves in the need to make decisions, we would collect a lot of the data that we would collect for an end of project retrospective and do that in the middle of the project. Typical retrospectives have to be positive. They have to be blameless. And the goal is to continuously improve ourselves, our team, and our processes. If we are approaching this with the correct mindset, we are asking all of the people who participated in the projects what are their individual takes on their parts of the project and on the larger scale of the project. And typically, these are the people who will then be working with you on the next project. One of the failure modes of retrospectives is when people don't really speak up. And I see that quite often at sprint retrospectives where people, sit there and don't say anything. Everything is fine. And that might be for two main reasons. One, they don't really care about improving much because it's fine. They tolerate it. It's the way that it is. But the second one is the one that I am more concerned with is the lack of psychological safety. When they don't feel like they can actually say what they think and have that result be well taken by the people in the room. We need to make sure that our team has a safe space to bring up these topics that we can actually change. And we can change a lot of things in our day-to-day and how projects are being managed and how communication happens, at what projects we pick and choose from when we do planning on an ongoing basis. So making sure that these venues are accessible to our team members kind of assures them that they have a stake at what happens next. And they can be impactful by virtue of what they say in postmortems, because at least in the scope of the team, we will listen, we care, and you can make a difference.
Hey there. In this module, we moved from the planning phase of the project lifecycle to the execution phase. You practiced quality management by defining quality standards for your project. Then you evaluated how successfully the project standards were being met and presented your findings to stakeholders. You also created a retrospective document. We also went deeper into some concepts you learned earlier and introduced a few new approaches, methods, and techniques. Along the way, you navigated negotiations, escalations, and conversations with people in different roles with different priorities and personalities. And finally, you picked up techniques for handling retrospectives when they don't go as smoothly as planned. You learned how to navigate through lack of accountability, lack of participation, and negativity in retrospectives, which helped you draft your own retrospective for Sauce and Spoon to add to your portfolio of artifacts. Great job. Now it's time to learn even more. Meet you back here for the next set of lessons. Hey there. In the upcoming activities, we'll continue the project execution phase and then transition to the closing phase of the project lifecycle. You'll demonstrate your ability to communicate with stakeholders by writing an email about a problem to a senior stakeholder. You'll also demonstrate your ability to wrap up a project by creating a closeout report to present the project impact to executive stakeholders. As you've learned throughout this program, communication is a vital part of effective project management. That's why in the coming activities, we'll have you practice observing communication between the Sauce and Spoon team. Based on those observations, you'll execute various communication techniques, including drafting emails to stakeholders, creating a closeout report, and writing an executive summary. At the end of this course, you'll take what you've learned and create your own personal impact report to reflect on your experience with this program. Ready to get started? Meet me in the next video to discuss communicating about project problems. Hi there. So far in this course, you've had the chance to practice communicating about key aspects of the project, like deliverables, scope, timeline, and budget. In this video, I'll discuss how to communicate project problems. In the upcoming activity, you'll learn how to synthesize a project problem into a one-sentence summary for a senior stakeholder. Combining information from multiple sources, like conversations, emails, and documents, is a skill that project managers use frequently. It's helpful to reference when leading conversations in meetings, writing documentation, and emailing team members regarding the project. Strong communication involves combining information, and potential employers may want you to prove you're capable of doing so effectively. The problem summary you'll write in the upcoming activity will be included in the practice email you'll create later on. Okay, let's discuss project problems. Every project has its problems, and communicating those problems is a part of your job as a project manager. Usually, project problems are small enough to address within the immediate project team. But occasionally, you'll need to escalate problems and proposed solutions to a senior stakeholder for their input and guidance on next steps. Stakeholders shouldn't have to read different project documents or consult multiple email threads in order to understand the project problem. Instead, it's your responsibility as a project manager to synthesize relevant information from multiple sources into a coherent summary that clearly communicates the issue. To write an effective one-sentence overview of a problem, you'll need to synthesize information from various sources, like emails, presentations, meeting notes, and more. Synthesizing requires gathering information from multiple sources and using those points to help form your own analysis. For example, it wouldn't be very helpful to send a stakeholder a link to your project plan because it doesn't give them a thorough understanding of what the problem entails. To determine which information is relevant and belongs in a 1 to 2 sentence overview for your stakeholders, ask yourself, how can I communicate a decision in a way that makes it easy for them to decide? For instance, let's say the project plan has 5 tasks overdue because of supplier delays, and this may ultimately affect the final deliverable of your project. You've been working on creating a few solutions to mitigate this issue. Rather than sending your stakeholders a link to the plan and pointing out all of the overdue tasks, you might summarize the problem by telling them, a number of tasks have run past their due date because of supplier issues, so we recommend hiring a second supplier to hit the deliverable date. Otherwise, we'll need to push the launch date back. This way, you present the problem succinctly to your stakeholders and offer a solution. This allows stakeholders to agree with your solution, disagree with your solution, or provide one of their own. Either way, you've communicated the problem and proposed a solution, which is your role as the project manager. Let's review. Communicating project problems is a part of your job as a project manager. It's also your responsibility to synthesize relevant information from multiple sources into a coherent summary that clearly communicates the issue. Synthesizing requires gathering information from multiple sources and using those points to help form your own analysis. In the upcoming activity, you'll practice communicating project problems by writing your 1 to 2 sentence overview of a problem with the Sauce and Spoon tablet pilot. You'll write this overview using information you'll synthesize from supporting materials. After you've completed the activity, meet me in the next video to learn more about project problems.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm a program manager at Google. I work on search. So the type of programs that I manage on search in particular are building features for billions of users all around the world on many surfaces, languages, and information needs that users all over the world have. I can't emphasize enough that problem solving is quintessentially the most important thing we do as program managers. It is the job. Whether it's a scope problem, something is out of scope or the scope is increasing or decreasing, whether it's a budgetary problem, like you don't have enough funds or too many funds, we don't have enough people, too many people, wrong skill sets of people, whether it's a timeline problem. These are all problems fundamentally at the end of the day we're here to solve. So our job is to identify it, figure out a framework based on our tools and our processes and methodologies, come up with a proposed solution, and then get buy-in for that solution. And the only way you're going to do that is to put something principally and organized together with these sort of tools and techniques and methods. I try to always understand what is the root cause of the problem itself. Typically, what you're experiencing is sort of a red herring or an outcome of the underlying problem. And so always debugging the initial underlying systemic issue or the process issue or the tooling issue or the technical issue, whatever it may be under the hood, is actually the first step. Once you're able to sort of identify and get enough information as to what that problem is and how you might solve it, then objectively putting a plan together based on those inputs is actually how you reach a decision, which is your ultimate outcome. Many times these sort of charters or scope docs or meeting notes or trackers or documents, these artifacts that we create or we manage on a day-to-day basis as part of our job is the job. But that's actually not the job. Those are just mechanisms and tools and methods to help you do the real job, which is, running scope, running programs, convincing people, driving organizational change, solving strategic initiatives. These things are just elements that help you navigate those problems as opposed to being the problems themselves. I think that's really, really important takeaway. I think this is the thing that we practice most at Google in particular is trying to solve more complex, more strategic, more holistic, larger, more complex problems on a day-to-day basis. If you're new to this space, you haven't had the opportunity to work on these big problems, how do you build that problem-solving expertise? Whether it's a hobby, whether it's, building a new piece of software for yourself or your friend, whether it's, another passion that you have in another industry, all of these are great ways to build skills and opportunities to just solve problems. Every industry, every business has them, and there are lots of ways to solve these and build those skills.
Welcome back. In the last video, you practiced communicating project problems by writing a brief summary of an issue affecting Sauce and Spoon's tablet pilot. In this video, we'll revisit a concept from a previous course on objectives and key results, or OKRs, and their connection to projects. Then, in the upcoming activity, you'll connect your problem statement to Sauce and Spoon's OKRs. The ability to identify a project problem's impact on your organization's OKRs will help you determine and communicate the appropriate level of risk and urgency of the problem. Objectives and key results are a tool for organization-wide goal setting. OKRs combine a goal and a metric to determine a measurable outcome. Let's break OKRs down. The objectives portion of the OKR defines what needs to be achieved, which is similar to a goal. The key results portion of the OKR defines how an organization, team, or individual will tangibly measure their success in meeting the objective. For example, one of Sauce and Spoon's objectives might be to prioritize customer needs and wants. So the key result that indicates they've reached this objective could be addressing feedback from customer reviews within 24 hours. Earlier in this course, you learned that OKRs can be a helpful reference point when determining if a project goal is relevant to the needs of an organization. If a project and its goals help contribute to the larger OKRs of an organization, that's a good sign that your project is relevant and worth the time and money required to complete it. OKRs can be a kind of shared language for an organization. Here at Google, for example, every project, big or small, aims to contribute in some tangible way to our organization-wide OKRs. Struggling to determine how a project might help us reach our OKRs can be a strong indication that we should reevaluate the project as a whole. OKRs can be really helpful to reference when communicating with stakeholders about project problems. You can make it clear to a stakeholder why a given problem needs to be addressed by identifying the specific ways in which that problem might impact an organization's wider OKRs. You can also point to them to explain to stakeholders why a problem is worth their attention. Stakeholders, especially those who hold senior positions within an organization, often have a lot of work to focus on, even beyond your project. Connecting a solution to a company's OKRs can catch a stakeholder's limited attention. Let's take the Sauce and Spoon objective of we seek to run an efficient, profitable business model, or we seek to prioritize our customer needs. As you fine-tune the problem summary you began in the previous activity, you can add a sentence to explain how the issue jeopardizes the Sauce and Spoon mission to run an efficient business model and meet customer needs. Let's review. In this video, you reviewed OKRs, or objectives and key results, defined OKRs as a tool for organization-wide goal setting, and learned how they're helpful when communicating with stakeholders about project problems. In the upcoming activity, you'll practice drawing connections between OKRs and project problems. You'll use what you learned from the supporting materials to write a sentence that connects your problem summary with Sauce and Spoon's OKRs. After you've completed the activity, meet me in the next video where we'll discuss composing emails to senior stakeholders. In the last video, we did a quick review of objectives and key results. We also discussed how connecting a project problem to an organization's OKRs can help convince a stakeholder to take that problem seriously. In this video, we'll review a few best practices for writing emails to get decisions you need from stakeholders. Then, in the upcoming activity, you'll use these best practices to compose an email to Sauce and Spoon stakeholders, outlining a project problem and requesting assistance. As a project manager, identifying and managing issues is part of the job. And if an issue is big enough to escalate to a senior stakeholder, then it's probably an issue you're hoping to resolve as soon as possible. Email can be an effective tool for quickly escalating a problem and asking for a decision from a stakeholder on how to proceed. That's why it's really important to ensure that your email is written in a way that effectively captures a stakeholder's attention and gets you the response you need. There are a few best practices to keep in mind to make sure your email doesn't get ignored. First, think about what's most important to your stakeholder. Often, senior stakeholders will be more interested in a problem's potential impact on an organization than its impact on a single project. This is where connecting project problems to an organization's OKRs comes in handy. Identify how a problem will impact your organization as a whole, and ensure that you clearly communicate that impact within the first 2 sentences of your email. Once you've determined what's most important to your stakeholder, you'll be better prepared to draft an effective email. Remember to write a clear subject line that briefly states what your email is about. It's also helpful to include language in your subject line that indicates what you'd like your stakeholder to do upon reading your email. Do you need them to review a document you've attached to the email? Try adding the words "please review" to your subject line. Is this an urgent email that you need a quick response to? Then you might try adding the word "urgent" to the subject line. Stakeholders, especially those who hold senior positions within an organization, usually receive many emails throughout the day. Including terms like urgent, timely, decision needed, or please review can help draw attention to your message and make clear the action you'd like your stakeholder to take. And remember to also keep the body of the email brief and to the point. When communicating about a project problem to a busy senior stakeholder, your email should briefly outline the problem, explain how it might impact an organization's goals, and clearly state the decision you need from your stakeholder in order to proceed. That's it. Write 1 or 2 sentences that summarize your problem, along with another sentence that identifies how the problem may impact your organization's OKRs. If there are documents or additional information that your stakeholder might need to review to make an informed decision, consider including hyperlinks or attachments with the information in your email. Once you've finished writing your email, be sure to proofread it for misspellings, grammatical errors, and inaccurate hyperlinks. Use spell check and other grammar check functions in your email application or online to help you make sure everything looks good. Let's review. When writing an email to stakeholders, make sure to do the following. Think about what's most important to your stakeholder. Write a clear subject line. Keep the body of the email brief, and proofread for misspellings, grammatical errors, and inaccurate hyperlinks. Someday, when you have to communicate issues to stakeholders in real-life situations, you'll see how managing, tracking, and communicating project problems is a huge part of running the project. In the upcoming activity, you'll apply email writing best practices when you compose an email to a stakeholder of the Sauce and Spoon tablet pilot.
I'm Laura, the Executive Productivity Advisor at Google. My role is to work one-on-one with executives in a coaching format in order to help them with time management, meeting management, effective email communication, and organization. When you're communicating with a stakeholder, you really want to think about the absolute important information that they need to see. So you might give more details when you're speaking with a coworker or a teammate, but when you're summarizing for an executive, you really want to make sure you keep it concise. You want to do some work beforehand to figure out what's the best way to get them information or to get a decision from them. Some things that can be helpful with that is asking someone like their executive assistant or someone that's worked with them before, asking them what is their preferred communication style? What types of presentations do they like to see? What information do they typically need in order to make decisions? And by doing that work ahead of time and asking around, you're setting yourself up for success, especially if you only have a limited amount of time or a short amount of communication that you're able to get to the stakeholder. It's important to remember that while you have multiple stakeholders or different projects, it is going to be different how each of them like to communicate or like to receive information. One example is I worked with a couple of managers on a project, and both of them were stakeholders. One was very talkative and loved to brainstorm through things. He wanted meetings with me pretty frequently, and he wanted to hash out all of the details. The other stakeholder was completely the opposite, thinking about how to tailor the same information, the same decision-making process to each person that you need information or stakeholder that you're working with is really helpful and important to remember. I like to look at a presentation I'm giving to a stakeholder and think, what are probably the 5 questions they're going to ask me? And then I have that additional detail in the appendix or ready to go so that I'm able to make the most of their time. Another good tip is when you come to a stakeholder with a problem or an issue, you also come with your proposed solution or possible solutions. Thinking about not just asking, what do I do? But saying, I think maybe we should do A, but we could also do B and C. What do you think? That gives them a starting point and they feel like you've done the background work and you know the problem really well. If you're sending an update via email, you really want to make sure, just like a meeting, that you're using the email in the best way possible.
Something I like to do, and that we do often at Google, is called TLDR at the top, which means too long, didn't read. It's kind of a funny way of saying there may be a lot of information, but here's the one sentence you need to know from the email. So having some sort of summary at the top similar to that, saying, here's an update on project A, or need decision, or action requested, or deadline by, that type of communication right up front gives the stakeholder the ability to know what's coming in the email. Then you want to think about how to be as concise as possible when you're developing the email. So using things like bullets, highlighting or bolding things that need to pop out to them, reiterating your ask at the end of the email, including any sort of deadlines that you have. That's really helpful so that if people are scanning or if they go back to read your email, they have all the information that they need, including links, attachments. Make it as easy as possible for them to go through your email and reply to you with the information that you need.
Hello there. By now you've been with Peta through some of the most essential pieces of managing and delivering a project. You've followed her as she's set goals, navigated through the planning process, managed quality, escalated issues to stakeholders, and more. Great work. We've reached the point in the project where Sauce and Spoon has launched the tablets after passing quality standards, and most of the project manager's work is done. In this video, we'll discuss one of the last elements of project management: closing out the project and showcasing its impact. Before Peta can consider her project completed, she has a few more tasks to take care of. One of those tasks is to create a closeout report. The closeout report is a great opportunity to compile all links and documentation into one place, a practice we like to call good project hygiene. The closeout report is also a time for reflection on your team's performance, and it helps your team ensure every task was completed. A closeout report confirms the project is done, summarizes deliverables, success metrics, feedback, lessons learned, and next steps, and serves as a reference document for the organization. If a follow-up project is required or a similar project is initiated, having these artifacts in one place will help these future projects run smoothly. And should another similar project occur, future project managers will be set up for success if they have meticulous information on past projects. An effective closeout report helps ensure that everyone is satisfied with the work that was done, finalizes the efforts of the team and lets people move on to new projects and tasks, and increases the impact of the team's work through communication with other people who may not have been as involved in the project. In addition to serving as a reference document for the organization, a project closeout report is a document created by project managers for project managers, future project managers, and anyone interested in the project elements and artifacts. Ideally, you want anyone unfamiliar with the project to be able to read it and get a full understanding of what the project was, why it was done, and how well the project went. In fact, the project closeout report you will complete in this course should be able to stand alone for your potential employers. You should be able to give them this document as a sample of your work. They should understand the context of the Sauce and Spoon tablet rollout project and get a demonstration of your ability to synthesize and communicate information clearly. In a project closeout report, you'll start by adding your project summary. In this section, you'll need to include the objectives. Another way to think about this: what was the desired result for this project? Next is methodology or approach. Make sure to denote which methodology or approach your team used. Is your team using waterfall, agile, lean? Maybe a combination of these or something else. One of the most important aspects of the closeout report is the performance baseline. Here, you'll describe the actual results and compare them to the objectives laid out in the planning and execution phases. You'll compare specifications like actual project schedule versus planned project schedule, actual project cost versus planned project cost, and planned scope versus delivered scope. There's even a handy notes column so you can explain any discrepancies or issues that arose. The remaining sections are key accomplishments and outcomes, lessons learned, next steps, and project documentation archive. When filling out these sections, being thorough is key. We've included questions to help guide you and ensure you're being detailed enough, but feel free to take it one step further in your own closeouts by getting even more specific. And when you're filling out these sections, keep in mind that the purpose of the closeout is to compile and archive the most important aspects of the project. Let's review. When writing a project closeout, make sure to include the following: project summary, methodology, performance baseline, outcomes, lessons learned, next steps, and add a project documentation archive. Hopefully, I've explained just how important the closeout report is for a project. If a project is repeated or a similar project is initiated, this important documentation, which includes your learnings and project outcomes, will set future project managers up for success. In the next activity, you'll review supporting materials to finish a closeout report for the Sauce and Spoon tablet pilot. In the last video and activity, you learned about keeping good project hygiene by creating a project closeout report. Now we'll discuss a similar concept called impact reporting, and you'll learn how to write an executive summary. The purpose of creating an impact report is to show others the value that's been added to your project. Usually, it's in the form of a presentation guided by a deck or slideshow you've created. Unlike a detailed closeout report that's designed for future project managers or other readers interested in the project details, an impact report is typically created for senior stakeholders or project sponsors who weren't involved in the day-to-day details of the project. Reporting your project impact is key for a few reasons. It can help you to analyze results to adapt and improve services, motivate staff and senior stakeholders by celebrating achievements, build trust and credibility with supporters, sponsors, funders, and anyone benefiting from the project, and share lessons with similar organizations. Let's get into the elements that should go into an impact report. One of the most important pieces of an impact report is the executive summary. It's where you can highlight the key points of the project for your stakeholders. An executive summary is a few sentences to a paragraph that describe the project's purpose and outcome. It provides an overview of the main points of a larger report. It's written to share with the stakeholders who might not have time to review the entire report. So think of the executive summary as a highlight reel for your project. The purpose is to give senior stakeholders a concise and strong description of positive outcomes within the project without giving them too much information or being too vague. When creating an executive summary, ask yourself this question: if an executive didn't have time to read all of the project documentation and only had time to read this executive summary, would they be able to understand the project highlights? Your executive summary should aim to answer questions like, how effectively was the project delivered? And what did we learn from it? In addition to asking yourself some foundational questions, it's a good idea to review your SMART goals, your business case, and your project charter to help you write the executive summary. These will help you reflect on and identify the most important aspects of your project, which are likely tied to key accomplishments and positive outcomes. One useful tip you might find helpful when creating an executive summary is to actually draft the rest of the impact report first. This will help you hone in on the most relevant information to include in your summary. In this impact report template, you'll see slides for results, what worked, and next steps. In these slides, you should aim to describe your project in detail using things like graphs and images where applicable to tell the story of the project's success. The more detailed you get in these slides, the easier it'll be to pull out and identify the highlights and add them to your executive summary. After you've drafted those sections of the impact report, you're ready to draft the executive summary. You'll want to include elements of the following information: project vision. Here, you'll specify what the purpose of the report was. What need is the project fulfilling? Key accomplishments. This is your opportunity to discuss which activities, tasks, and milestones helped you define success. What are the main highlights in the impact report? Did your project increase profitability? What value did the project add? Talk about those here. Lessons learned. This is where you'll talk about potential improvements. How will you change future processes for the better? Okay, let's explore an example of an executive summary. Say you just completed a project to launch a new money-saving app that automatically sends money from its users' checking accounts into designated savings accounts bi-monthly. The amount sent from checking to savings is determined by how much money you have in your checking account at the time of withdrawal, plus a few other variables, like the frequency of deposits. Your beta users loved the app because it helped them build a savings account without even thinking about it. So let's start with our project's vision. It might say something like, our goal was to help users get ahead financially by creating an algorithm-based automatic deposit system that pools money into a savings account. Now, let's talk about what the project accomplished. These are your key accomplishments. So you might say, as we prepared to launch, we helped 1,000 beta users save over $300,000 in just 6 months. This proved the use case and need for our app. And in key accomplishments, you might also want to include financial highlights. So we could say something like, by charging users $3 per month, with 1,000 users in 6 months, we netted $18,000. Finally, it's good to talk about what things could have been done differently. Include lessons learned by saying something like, the main feedback received from our beta testing was that our users wanted more frequent updates about when their money was being transferred. We'll add that in our update. Okay, let's review the main ideas we've covered in this video. Reporting your impact can help you to analyze results to adapt and improve services, motivate staff and senior stakeholders through celebrating achievements, build trust and credibility with supporters, sponsors, funders, and those benefiting from the project, and share lessons with similar organizations. And we also covered executive summaries and how they're essential to highlighting the key elements of your project to stakeholders. Now that you've got a better idea of what an impact report might entail, it's time to write your own executive summary. We've built out an impact report so you can get a sense of what a typical report might look like. All you have to do is fill in the executive summary based on your new insights. Hi again, and congrats on reaching the end of this course. So far, you've used the skills you learned in previous videos to execute the entire lifecycle of our example project with Sauce and Spoon. First, in the initiation phase, you learned how to create a project charter, and then you identified project goals and deliverables. You demonstrated how to conduct a stakeholder analysis to prepare for negotiations with stakeholders. Then, you went into the planning phase where you determined tasks in order to accomplish the goals set forth. You learned the value of holding team brainstorms in order to ensure all tasks were included, and we explored some techniques for creating accurate time estimates for each of those tasks. As you moved from the planning to the execution phase, you started executing tasks as part of quality management, where you set quality standards and measured quality with user surveys. Next up was the closing phase, where you learned how to connect problems to project goals by creating OKRs. And you learned the importance of a closeout report. Finally, you learned about impact reporting and how to write a great executive summary so that your senior stakeholders can quickly understand the impact of your project. In the next video, we'll wrap up the whole program and apply the knowledge you've gained to taking the next step in your project management career. See you soon. You've come such a long way in this course. Let's take a moment to celebrate your successes in growth and project management. We call this process personal closing reporting. Similar to what you've done in the retrospective documents and closeout reports you've created throughout this program, let's take a moment to reflect on what you just completed, the Google Project Management Certificate. Let's start by listing your key accomplishments. Think all the way back to when you first started the program up until now. What challenges have you overcome throughout this process? Maybe there were particular lessons or concepts that you didn't think you'd ever understand, but you surprised yourself when you finally figured them out. Maybe you overcame challenges in your personal life while taking this course. If you have a full-time job but still found the time to complete this course, that's a major win. Take a moment to write some of these down. Then reflect on any lessons you've learned. Maybe you were having a busy week and you feel like you didn't spend enough time on one particular lesson. You might have wanted to read it more thoroughly because you felt it was important. Maybe you learned that you loved managing stakeholders, but you didn't enjoy budgeting and procurement as much. Take note of those learnings. Next, you'll want to think about what steps you can take from here to advance your project management career. This could be contacting recruiting companies or asking your current boss to give you more responsibility. Maybe it's setting a goal to spruce up your resume and apply to 5 project management jobs a week. Write those next steps down. Then, take that a step further and add your goals to a timeline as if they're part of a project you're managing. Like we've said time and time again, project management is part of your everyday life. Then finally, add your own executive summary. Rather than the executive summary you learned about earlier, this is an executive summary of your experiences in the program. When you're writing your executive summary, describe your experience with this program as a whole. Take note of your successes and how you plan to advance your career in project management moving forward. This should feel inspiring and fun, so feel free to include all kinds of highlights. Maybe you scored high on a certain quiz and you want to pat yourself on the back for that. Maybe you were able to apply some of the concepts you learned to the planning of your family reunion. Maybe you learned a lot about a specific topic that you had never researched before and you really enjoyed it. Whatever it is, be sure to highlight it here. And with that, you're ready to complete your personal closing report. Take this report with you as a project artifact to look back on your experience with us throughout this program. Just like you would for your team at the end of a project, celebrate your successes and strive to always keep growing and improving. That brings us to the end of the program, but it's just the beginning of your journey in project management. Take a moment to celebrate yourself and all you've achieved. Not only did you remain diligent in your search for new information and knowledge, you also have a portfolio of work to show potential employers. No matter what comes next, you should feel confident that you have the skills you need to be an amazing project manager. I can't wait to see what you do. Congratulations and good luck.
If you've been following along throughout the entire program, I hope you're excited to update your resume, explore your target role, and build your professional network. Your next step is to prepare for the job interview. First, we'll discuss how to create an elevator pitch you can use for different situations during your job search. Chances are you've heard the phrase, "Tell me about yourself." For situations like this, it's helpful to come up with an elevator pitch that can lead you into a longer conversation about your experience and reveal opportunities for your next step. An elevator pitch is a quick professional summary of yourself. Typically, it's designed for you to present in 60 seconds or less, conveniently the time it may take for you to go up from the first floor of a building to the 50th. Over the years, my elevator pitch has changed dramatically. I used to think that I needed to have the most polished pitch. But over time, what I found is that my elevator pitch needed to be the most authentic. For instance, I used to say things like, "I love project management because I like to make order out of chaos," which is true, but generic. Today, I say I don't just love project management, but I'm kind of in love with project management, which is also true because I help make dreams come to life. So as you're preparing your elevator pitch, it's helpful to come up with an authentic story about your passion and why project management excites you. Really take time to think about why you want a specific type of role or what draws you to a specific industry. What genuinely excites you about the job? These are the details that make for a great elevator pitch. To craft a strong elevator pitch, break it down into 3 parts: who you are, what skills and experiences you have, and what you want. Start with who you are. Introduce yourself and speak in a conversational tone. For example, you might say something like, "I started my career in project management a few years ago, and recently I've been drawn to the gaming space. I've always been good at bringing people together and working towards common goals. My experience successfully leading teams and managing new app developments led me to look for opportunities in the industry." Summarize what you do using your experiences and background that are relevant to the people you're speaking to. For example, try writing 1 to 3 bullets focused on what you did in your last job or in another experience and what you enjoyed. If you come up with more than 1 to 3, that's fine. You'll tailor it so all of the pieces come together. This might sound something like, "I have a military background which taught me the value of organization." Or, "I speak 3 languages which help me to relate to many different cultures." To, I tried a hand at a support role, but realized that I enjoy driving the execution of a project more. Finally, explain what you want. This part of the pitch is unique to the setting and the person you're pitching to. If you're trying to connect online with someone who works at a company you're interested in, you may ask for a phone conversation or a short meeting. If you're interviewing, you may ask for the job opportunity. Be sure to highlight the value you bring and what you have to offer. And remember, you're asking someone to take time out of their busy day to spend time with you. Although most people love to help, they have constraints with their time, so you'll want to give them a reason why they should help you instead of someone else. Do you share common backgrounds? Do you have a story that may be interesting to them? Commonalities or interesting facts will help them to remember you. Your elevator pitch will change over time, but once you create one, you can make adjustments. You can use it while writing a cover letter, networking at an event, and interviewing for a job. Next step, we'll discuss ways to prepare for an interview. Now that you've landed your elevator pitch, it's time to start preparing for some of the questions you can expect to come up in your interviews. You'll want to think about the types of experiences and projects you'd like your interviewer to know about. While you may not know exactly what questions will be asked, it's important to feel prepared to discuss a few scenarios that can be applied to common interview questions. Interviewers will commonly ask a variety of behavioral, hypothetical, and factual questions. Behavioral questions are those that allow the interviewee to share an example when they had to practice a particular skill. You can think of these as the "tell me about a time when" questions. Interviewers that ask hypothetical questions will typically present a scenario to you and then ask you how you would go about working through that experience. These questions are more difficult to prepare for because there are infinite scenarios for an interviewer to present. But we'll talk through ways you can land these questions confidently. And finally, you may see some factual questions come up in an interview. Factual questions aim to assess you on your knowledge of basic project management skills. For example, what are the steps to initiating a project? How do you know when you can move on to the next step? In fact, these questions might look familiar to some of the assessments you've completed throughout the certificate program. Behavioral, hypothetical, and factual questions aim to assess your role-related knowledge. Basically, an interviewer wants to know if you have the skills to perform well in the role. Your responses to these questions will assess how you prioritize competing deadlines, if you can effectively manage budget and workload, and how you work with others, for example. When preparing for an upcoming interview, think about the common project manager skills that a company is looking for by reviewing job descriptions. Then, think about the experiences you've had that really showcase those skills. It may be a past work experience, a school project, or an activity you completed in this program. It's important that you provide clear responses to your interviewer, so we recommend the STAR method. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result, and is a great way to organize your response, following a story-like structure. Let's break these down further. First, you begin with the situation. For example, if your interviewer asked you, "Tell me about a time when you had a project deliverable that was not going to meet high-quality expectations. What did you do?" Using the STAR method, you'll want to explain the situation and the experience you'll be using to answer their question. It's important to share the right amount of context. While you want them to understand the complexities you were dealing with, sharing everyone's individual role may be unnecessary to share for the purpose of the question. Now that you've set the scene, you'll need to speak about the specifics. What was the task or your involvement or responsibility in the scenario? What deliverable were you assigned to complete? What was the quality you were aiming for? Next, you'll provide more detail. What action or actions did you take? This is where you really want to highlight your contributions. When did you realize your deliverable was not meeting the quality standards you were aiming for? What was your reaction to this, and what decisions did you make to course correct? Who did you partner with, and how did you communicate this to your manager or team? This part of your response may take up the most time to cover, as you can highlight multiple skills here. but make sure to keep a clear and structured response. The final part of your response should be focused on the result. Here, you should discuss the outcome from the decisions you made and the impact you had. And in some cases, especially if you're sharing an experience that came with challenges, it may make some sense to share the lessons you've learned. Finally, where possible, use data to reinforce your response. Practicing the STAR method in your responses and preparing for a few scenarios in advance will help you feel more confident going into an interview. Let's cover a simple example. Suppose the interview question is, tell me about a time when you faced a challenge during implementation. I'd start with a situation. We were working on launching a new internal support tool in my region by the end of the year. It was crucial to have it launched before everyone took end-of-year vacation, but we were facing delays due to a lengthy stakeholder sign-off process. Then I'd move into the task portion. I was responsible for managing this project end-to-end and ensuring we rolled out the support tool to all of the employees in my region. Next, the action I took. To ensure we would meet our timeline, I took a look at the sign-off process and noticed it called for hundreds of terms, documents, pamphlets, and video reviews that had to be signed off by every person in the team. This wasn't the appropriate level of detail needed from these stakeholders or a valuable use of their time. I summarized the areas of concern and opportunity that the stakeholders needed to approve and created a condensed review process. As a result, we were able to mitigate the delays in the sign-off and launch the tool on time in December. And while coming prepared with responses is important, interviewing is not just about answering questions. It's a conversation between you and the interviewer to learn more about the role and see if you can envision yourself in that job. Before your interview, you should also do some research into the company. What are some questions that come to mind? Do you want to know more about the company culture? Are you looking to find out what types of projects you'd be managing? What does success look like for someone new in this role? Employers know that you have questions. In fact, that's what they're expecting. As your interviewer is responding to your questions, listen and ask any follow-ups so they know what's important to you and so you learn more about what it'd be like working in that role. Ultimately, the most important thing is to be prepared for an interview. That means spending time thinking through experiences that showcase your skills, practicing how you'd like to structure your responses, and preparing questions you'd like to ask your interviewer. This will also help your confidence, which can show up in your demeanor and go a long way. In the next video, we'll chat through tips for interviewing remotely. See you there. In this video, we'll talk through some tips for interviewing remotely. You may have spent time practicing scenarios to discuss and putting together questions to ask your interviewer, but it's also good to have a plan for remote interviews. While in-person interviews usually provide an opportunity to explore the office and meet different employees, remote interviews are very popular as video conferencing technology and remote work has expanded over the years. It's important to remember that remote interviews take the same amount of preparation as a face-to-face interview. Instead of checking traffic in advance to make sure you arrive on time, you'll be deciding the best quiet space to take the interview and make sure your surroundings are comfortable. Remote interviews may come in the form of a phone or video conference. For many roles, it's common for an interview process to be done in 2 or more rounds of interviews. Some companies prefer to start with a quick phone interview to get in touch with candidates and hear more about their background, and do an initial screening to be sure their skills and experience are aligned with the job requirements. For phone interviews, make sure you are ready for the call 15 to 30 minutes in advance. While it's unlikely you'll get a phone call 30 minutes early, scheduling time to minimize distractions is important. Decide where you feel most comfortable taking the phone call, and be sure to minimize distractions, turning off phone alerts and other devices. While talking to the interviewer or recruiter on the phone, you can have notes in front of you, perhaps your resume or scenarios written down that can help you remember things you'd like to highlight on the call. Another tip is don't forget to smile. It may sound silly since your interviewer can't see you on the other end of the phone, but you'll come across as more engaged and confident while talking. While some companies will choose to conduct all interviews over the phone, Typically, you'll get a chance to connect with someone over video conference during the interview process. Technical issues during a video interview can be scary and can easily cause both you and the interviewer to feel flustered. So it's a good idea to test your video, audio, and internet connection well in advance. Try setting up a practice interview with a friend or mentor using the same video conferencing technology that your interview will use. This way, you can get a sense for how you and the other person will look on your screen, and you'll be able to confirm your connection will suffice. Know that technical issues do happen, though, and you shouldn't be penalized if something comes up during the interview. If you get disconnected, you can send the recruiter or interviewer an email letting them know of the technical glitch and request additional time if needed. If you can't hear the interviewer for whatever reason, most video conference tools have a chat option. You can politely tell them you're experiencing some technical difficulties. Another thing to prepare for in advance for a video interview is testing your surroundings and finding a comfortable setting ahead of time. You don't want your interviewer to be distracted by something going on behind you. So find a space that allows the interviewer to just focus on you. Also, find a space with proper lighting and a simple background. When talking to your interviewer, you should be looking directly into the camera and establish a direct line of sight with them. Similar to a phone interview, interviewing remotely over video allows you to have notes prepared, but in this case, it's important not to be looking down too frequently. It won't be a strong interview if you're simply reading from a scenario you had pre-written. It's important that the interview remains a conversation and you're engaging with the person on the other end. The best advice here is to prepare. Whether you're talking to someone over the phone or over a video call, spend some time getting comfortable and practicing in advance so you feel more confident when the interview starts. Interviewing is an exciting time. You finally get to show off all the knowledge and skills you've gained over the course of this program. We've covered so much together, and it's just the beginning. As you progress through your career, you'll continue your learning journey. We're glad to have been a part of it.
So how does one apply for their first job in project management?
Your resume, make sure it doesn't have any typos or grammar issues. Definitely having anybody peer review it, right? Friends, family can go a long way. And then just reading it out loud. You'll catch a lot of grammatical and spelling errors that way.
A resume is your pitch. It's you're walking in and you're explaining to somebody why you're the right person for the job. So the things that you call out on your resume and the experience that you highlight on your resume shouldn't just be something generic that you copied and pasted from a website that describes what your role should be doing. It should be the experience that you would share with somebody in person if you were trying to tell them why you could do the job that you're applying for. Your resume should highlight the experience that shows why you are valuable to the company that you're asking to hire you.
For me, when interviewing, it's super intriguing to hear things that have failed and what you have learned from it and how you apply those learnings going forward.
You don't have a lot of project management work experience when you just get started, but you have life experience. Life experience is actually what matters most for program managers because it is about people. And working with other people is what makes a project manager successful at their role.
We want to know that you fundamentally can come in and think about how to solve problems and get things done, regardless of how many times you may have done that in the past.
Another tip is when preparing for an interview, have the artifacts prepared that describe the difference you have made in your past experiences, your learnings from those experiences, and how you have applied those going forward to prevent other problems.
I wrote down a large number of questions that could come up. Tell me about a time when you worked through conflict. Tell me about a time when you exhibited leadership skills despite not being in a leadership position. Tell me about a time when you were behind on a project and had to communicate a challenge to a stakeholder. I listed all those questions and then tried to write 1 or 2 sentences about each so that I was prepared when similar questions did arise, which they almost always will.
It may sound cliche, but my tip would be just to be yourself. Try to highlight a lot of your organizational skills, your leadership skills, and some examples where you've been able to communicate well across different audiences.
Another example of what is useful for interviews is really to think about specific examples of projects. Read lots of case studies that are available over the internet on projects that derailed and project that went well, and what was done from the angle of a program management to set things off in a direction that is correct, and to sort of solve some of the problems that people have encountered along the way.
Learn all the time. Read as many articles as you can about project management. Listen to TED Talks, attend meetups, online meetups, of course, if you can. And make sure to immerse yourself in the language of the field that you want to join. You don't have to be very technical to be a software project manager, but you do need to understand what is it about.
Get some rest. And if you're an anxious person, I know I'm very anxious at times for interviewing. I was very anxious for my interviews here for Google. Going for a jog, right, or a run, or just going outside, just anything that can kind of calm your nerves that you generally know that works for you. I would say that is to try to be as calm as possible.
Be genuine, be yourself. I typically don't, get over-indexed on, overdressing or overplaying a part or pretending that you are what you aren't. Because look, at the end of the day, I just want to know how people think and how they'll function and how they'll be a good team player. We look for genuine people who want to do good work. They're positive people to work with. They're people who are good team players and fundamentally can just get stuff done.
Enthusiasm matters a lot. It matters more than knowledge, especially in junior positions. When we hire juniors, we're looking for potential. We are looking for people who would be motivated to learn and to grow. And if you have that spark in your eyes for whatever is it that you're interviewing for, that will be visible to whoever's talking to you.
Yo, congratulations on taking the first step in your journey to becoming a project or a program manager.
You rock. I've never been as proud of you as I am at this moment.
It was a long journey, but you made it. Great job.
Job well done. What you've managed to do is not a trivial thing.
You completed the course. You absolutely crushed it.
Woo! Mazel tov to all my new project managers. Glad to add you to the ranks. What an important milestone. The first of many.
We are really happy for you. This is a great step that you accomplished in your professional career.
Wow, I'm so excited for you.
You did it.
Fantastic job.
Good work. You did awesome.
This was a great accomplishment.
Keep going.
Nicely done.
You got this.
I'm so proud of you.
Congratulations.
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 Well done completing this great long journey through your project management course. Good luck on the start of your career and best of luck on your long journey ahead.
Hi there. My name is Kevin Hartman, and I'm Director of Analytics here at Google. We hope you've enjoyed the certificate and that you're excited about all the growth you've experienced. Congratulations. Now it's time to take what you have learned and share it with the world. Check out the career resources in the end of certificate checklist to get started, and you won't want to miss it. There you will find resources to help you discover and prepare for your next job opportunity. Take the time to review the checklist and take advantage of these exclusive offers. We especially recommend signing up for the job platform linked in the checklist and creating a profile highlighting your new certificate and the skills you gained. Also, be sure to keep a close eye on your inbox for future career resources and opportunities from Coursera and Google. Best of luck ahead. We're so excited for you.